Hello everyone, and welcome to the DXD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was a vampire king and fall in love with the Maou Serafall Leviathan. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Crimson Throne. The last drop of blood fell from his lips as Issei Hyodo closed his eyes, savoring the metallic sweetness that had sustained him for 2 millennia. The moon hung heavy and full above Tokyo's glittering skyline, casting silver light across his penthouse balcony. He could feel each individual heartbeat in the city below, millions of them, pulsing with life, unaware of the ancient predator who dwelled among them. Another disappearance in Shibuya, he murmured to himself, setting down the crystal goblet. The 5th this month. The newspaper lay open on the glass table, its headline declaring another unexplained vanishing. To human eyes, it appeared to be the work of a serial kidnapper. To Issei's crimson gaze, the pattern was unmistakable. Vampires were being hunted, systematically and with disturbing precision. He rose in one fluid motion, his tall frame silhouetted against the city lights. 2,000 years of existence had refined his every movement into something both effortless and predatory. His fingers traced the ancient signet ring on his left hand, a blood-red stone set in black and silver, embossed with the crest of the Crimson Court. Few remained who would recognize it, few still who would understand its significance. The soft vibration of his phone interrupted his contemplation. The name on the screen made his expression darken, Elmenhild Karnstein. "Speak," he answered, his voice carrying the subtle resonance that centuries of command had etched into it. "My lord," came the aristocratic female voice, tinged with an accent from a country that no longer existed. "3 more of our kind have vanished from Vienna. The council is convening an emergency session. Your presence is requested." Issei's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Requested? How diplomatic of them. The same council that declared me obsolete a century ago now seeks my counsel." "Circumstances have changed," Elmenhild replied carefully. "The patterns match those from the purge of 1649. A flash of memory. Burning villages, witch hunters with blessed silver, the scent of his kindred turning to ash, crossed his mind." Issei's fingers tightened around the phone until the metal frame groaned in protest. "Impossible," he stated flatly. "The Belmont lineage ended. I ensured it myself. Nevertheless, the evidence suggests." "I will investigate the Tokyo disappearances personally," he interrupted. "If what you suggest is true, this is not a matter for the council's bureaucracy." He ended the call before she could protest, sliding the phone into the pocket of his impeccably tailored black suit. The Council of Night, with their endless politics and outdated traditions, would debate while more disappeared. 2 millennia had taught Issei the value of direct action. Within moments, he had changed into attire better suited for hunting. Dark tactical clothing that allowed full freedom of movement while revealing nothing of the arsenal concealed beneath. The ancient sword he strapped to his back had tasted the blood of crusaders, samurai, and Nazi occultists alike. Tonight, it might drink again. As he prepared to leave, a subtle shift in the air pressure made him pause. His senses, honed through centuries of survival, detected the faintest disturbance in the mystical barriers surrounding his residence. Someone, or something, with considerable power was probing his defenses. Issei moved to the center of his living room and closed his eyes, extending his consciousness outward. The magical tripwires he had laid throughout the building remained untouched, but Somethi Ing was interfering with the outer perimeter. Not trying to break in, simply observing, analyzing. "Curious," he whispered, opening his eyes. The pupils had contracted to vertical slits, the irises glowing with internal crimson light. "Let's see what manner of creature thinks itself clever." He dissolved into a swarm of crimson mist, slipping through the microscopic gaps in his balcony door and forming on the rooftop 60 stories above Tokyo. The night air carried the scent of rain, automobile exhaust, and something else, something arcane and distinctly non-human. Issei tracked the magical signature across 3 city blocks, moving with preternatural speed along rooftops and through shadows. The average human eye would register nothing more than a momentary darkening, like a cloud passing briefly over the moon. The trail led to an abandoned warehouse near the docks, its windows boarded and walls covered in graffiti. To ordinary passers-by, it appeared derelict and unremarkable. To Issei's enhanced senses, it pulsed with concealment spells and barrier magic, sophisticated work that spoke of considerable power and expertise. He circled the building twice, identifying 7 distinct magical alarms and 5 physical traps. With methodical precision, he disabled each one without triggering its companion systems. The technique required patience developed over centuries, something young vampires rarely possessed, making them vulnerable to exactly this kind of trap. The warehouse's heavy metal door opened without a sound under Issei's touch. Inside, the cavernous space appeared, empty and dust-covered in the dim moonlight filtering through broken windows. He knew better. His nostrils flared slightly, catching the copper tang of fresh blood and the unmistakable ashen scent of vampire remains. "You're late, Nightwalker," came a female voice from the shadows, speaking Japanese with a peculiar accent that Issei couldn't immediately place. "I expected you 3 disappearances ago." Issei remained perfectly still, his senses expanding to map every corner of the warehouse. The speaker was positioned in the upper level, partially concealed behind a support beam. 2 more figures flanked the main floor, their heartbeats betraying their positions despite their magical concealment. "You've gone to considerable trouble to gain my attention," Issei replied evenly, making no move toward the weapons concealed on his person. "I assume there's a purpose beyond testing my response time to the deaths of lesser vampires." A soft laugh echoed through the warehouse. Lesser vampires. How typically arrogant of the ancient ones. Those lesser creatures were bait, yes, but they were also guilty of violating the accords. "We merely expedited their punishment." The supernatural accords, the fragile peace treaty between the major paranormal factions that had prevented all-out war for the past century. Issei had been present at their signing, though he'd used a different name and face then. "You're not vampire hunters," he observed, taking a single step forward into a shaft of moonlight. "The magic you're using has the distinct flavor of the underworld. Devil work." There was a momentary silence. Then a slow, deliberate clapping. A woman stepped out of the shadows on the upper level, and Issei felt a surge of genuine surprise for the first time in decades. She was small in stature, with an appearance that could be mistaken for that of a young woman in her early 20s. Long black hair was styled in twin tails, and she wore what appeared to be a magical girl costume complete with a pink wand and star-tipped staff. The outfit was so incongruous with the warehouse setting that it momentarily disrupted Issei's assessment. But the power radiating from her was unmistakable, ancient, deep, and cold as the void between stars. This was no ordinary devil. "Correct on all counts, Vampire King," she said, twirling her staff casually. "Though I'm disappointed you don't recognize me. We did meet once, about 300 years ago. You were using a different name then. Something Germanic, if I recall." Issei narrowed his eyes. Memory. The magical signature was distinctive, but the appearance was throwing him off. Then it clicked into place. "Serafall Leviathan," he said, genuine respect coloring his voice. "One of the 4 Satans. You've changed your aesthetic considerably since the Prussian incursion." "And you haven't changed at all," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Still lurking in shadows, playing the detached OBS. While your kind violates the boundaries between realms." Issei raised an eyebrow. "If you're suggesting I have something to do with these disappearances." "Not directly," Serafall interrupted, her childish appearance at odds with the authority in her voice. "But 3 devils have vanished in the past week, in addition to your vampires. The magical signature left behind matches ancient vampire blood magic, the kind only the oldest of your kind can perform." She descended the metal staircase with delicate steps, the absurd magical girl outfit somehow not diminishing the aura of danger surrounding her. The 2 figures on the main floor moved to flank her, both female, both radiating considerable power, though nothing approaching their leaders. "If the Vampire Council can't control its elders," Serafall continued, "then perhaps it's time for external regulation." The temperature in the warehouse dropped precipitously, frost forming on the concrete floor around her feet. Issei recognized the warning signs of a Leviathan preparing for combat, subtle by devil standards, but unmistakable to one who had witnessed their power firsthand. "Before you turn this warehouse into an ice sculpture," Issei said calmly, "consider that I'm here investigating the same disappearances. If devils are also vanishing with vampire blood magic signatures, then someone is deliberately creating evidence to pit our factions against each other. Serafall paused, her staff half raised. An interesting theory. Convenient, but interesting. I don't deal in convenience, Leviathan. I deal in survival. Issei reached slowly into his jacket, noting how her bodyguards tensed, and withdrew a small vial of dark liquid. This is from the third vampire disappearance site. Analysis shows trace elements of blessed silver and devil ichor mixed with the victim's blood. He tossed the vial toward her. It never reached its target. Instead, it froze in midair, encased in a perfect cube of ice that floated gently into Serafall's outstretched hand. If you're lying to me, Vampire King, she said softly, examining the vial through its icy prison, I'll personally ensure that your next death is permanent. If I were behind these disappearances, Issei replied with the faintest hint of amusement, do you really believe I'd be careless enough to leave evidence for Maou to find? Their eyes met. AC. Ross the warehouse, crimson vampire against ice blue devil. For a moment, the air between them seemed charged with potential violence. Then, unexpectedly, Serafall's serious expression melted into a bright smile that transformed her entire demeanor. You've got a point there, she exclaimed in a sing-song voice that contrasted jarringly with her previous tone. And it would be super boring if vampires and devils started fighting again. My paperwork would triple. The abrupt shift in demeanor would have disoriented a lesser being. Issei, however, recognized the tactical nature of the change. A deliberate disruption meant to unbalance opponents. He'd used similar techniques himself, though with considerably less theatrical flair. I propose a temporary alliance, he offered, maintaining his composed demeanor. Share information, investigate jointly, identify the actual culprit before more disappearances occur. Serafall tapped her staff against her chin thoughtfully, the serious strategist visible beneath the childish gesture. Working with a vampire, the elders would have a collective aneurysm. Her smile widened, which makes it even more appealing. But I'll need guarantees. Name them. Full disclosure of all vampire movements in Tokyo for the duration. Access to your research and resources. And a binding oath that you won't use anything you learn about devil operations against us in the future. Issei considered for precisely 3 seconds. Agreed to the first two. The third is unnecessarily broad. I'll swear not to use information gathered during this joint investigation against devil interests. But a blanket prohibition on using knowledge is neither practical nor enforceable. Serafall laughed, the sound echoing like tinkling ice crystals through the warehouse. Still the careful negotiator. Fine. Limited to this investigation. She spun her staff in a complex pattern, creating a glowing magic circle. Blood oath. Issei nodded once, approaching the circle. Blood oaths between powerful supernatural entities were serious matters. Violations resulted in consequences far beyond mere contractual penalties. He extended his hand over the circle, then said a fingernail to slice his palm precisely. Dark blood, thicker and richer than human vitae, dripped into the magical construct. Serafall did the same, her blood glowing with internal power as it mingled with his in the circle. The magic flared bright blue, then crimson, before settling into a purple glow that surrounded both of them momentarily before fading. Sealed and witnessed, she declared, her voice momentarily resonating with formal power before returning to its casual lilt. So, partners, this'll be fun. When was the last time you worked with anyone outside your spooky vampire court? 1943, Issei replied without hesitation. A temporary arrangement with the Shinto faction to contain an honorable ritual in Manchuria. Ooh, the Nazi occultists. Those guys were the worst, Serafall said, tucking her staff away in what appeared to be thin air. Always summoning things they couldn't control. Such amateurs. Her two guards exchanged concerned glances, clearly uncomfort. Our table with their leader's casual attitude toward the vampire. Issei noted their discomfort but chose not to acknowledge it. Subordinates. Opinions were irrelevant to the arrangement. I have a cafe house nearby where we can compare information, he said. Unless you prefer to continue this discussion in an abandoned warehouse with at least 16 different listening devices currently recording our conversation. Serafall's eyes widened fractionally, genuine surprise, not theatrical this time. 16. I only detected 12, she pouted. That's annoying. With a casual wave of her hand, heat temperature in the warehouse plummeted to absolute zero for a microsecond. The flash freeze shattered every electronic device concealed within the building, leaving tiny fragments of frozen circuitry to rain down around them. Problem solved, she announced cheerfully. But your safe house sounds good. Lead the way, Vampire King. Issei permitted himself the smallest of smiles. Working with the Leviathan would be unpredictable, potentially dangerous, and certainly complicated. But after centuries of the Council's stagnant politics and younger vampires' tedious ambitions, unpredictable had a certain appeal. This way, he said, turning toward a side exit. And please, in this era, I go by Issei Hyodo. Issei, Serafall repeated, testing the name. Cute. You can call me Sarah. All my friends do. Are we friends now, Leviathan? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Her smile remained bright, but her eyes held centuries of calculation. That depends entirely on how this investigation unfolds, doesn't it? The safe house was a traditional Japanese structure nestled incongruously between modern high-rises in one of Tokyo's oldest districts. From the outside, it appeared to be a small, unremarkable heritage building that somehow had avoided development. The perception was deliberate. Multiple layers of illusion and aversion spells ensured that human eyes slid past it without registering anything noteworthy. Issei disarmed 7 distinct magical wards before sliding open the wooden door. The interior Ryan of traditional architecture and modern technology, paper screens and tatami floors coexisting with advanced computer systems and magical apparatus. Cozy, Serafall exclaimed, bouncing inside with childlike enthusiasm that Issei now recognized as her public persona. The moment the door closed behind them, sealing the magical barriers, her demeanor shifted subtly. She remained animated, but her eyes took on a sharper quality as she systematically assessed every detail of the space. You've maintained this property for some time, she observed, noting the worn path in specific floorboards that spoke of centuries of use. Pre-Meiji era construction, but the foundation. She tapped her foot lightly. Older, much older. Issei inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her perception. The original structure dates to 1192. It has been rebuilt 8 times, always preserving the core elements. The land beneath it is significant. Ley line convergence point, Serafall stated rather than asked. Clever. Constant magical regeneration would sustain your power during daylight hours. Her guards remained alert, hands never straying far from concealed weapons. Issei ignored them, moving to a lacquered cabinet that opened to reveal a modern touchscreen interface. His fingers danced across the surface, bringing up holographic displays of Tokyo with pulsing red markers indicating the vampire disappearances. The first occurred here, he said, highlighting a point in Akihabara. The victim was Takashi Himuro, turned in 1887, moderately powerful but politically unambitious. The second was here, another point illuminated in Shibuya, Eliza Blackwood, British-born, turned in 1921. Known for her extensive art collection and nothing else of note. Serafall approached the display, all pretense of frivolity gone as she studied the pattern. Our first disappeared here, she said, touching a point that created a blue marker in Roppongi. Marius Phoenix, minor nobility, in Tokyo on business. The second was Ileana Grimori, diplomat assigned to Supernatu. Raw relations with the Japanese government. She added 2 more blue points to the map. As the 5 disappearance points glowed on the display, an unmistakable pattern emerged, a perfect pentagram across Tokyo's districts. Ritual geometry, Issei and Serafall said simultaneously. Their eyes met briefly, mutual recognition of the other's knowledge creating a momentary connection that surprised them both. Issei recovered first, zooming the map outward to show the city's ley line structure. The pentagram aligns with minor power junctions, he noted. Not the main convergence points where security would be higher. Building toward something, Serafall mused, tracing the pattern with her finger. If they maintain the geometric progression, the next target would be here, Issei completed, highlighting a point in Ueno. Tonight, based on the timing of previous disappearances. Serafall nodded, her twintails bouncing with the movement. Then we have a stakeout date. The childish phrasing returned, though the strategic calculation never left her eyes. Should we bring snacks? I love snacks during stakeouts. One of her guards finally broke her silence. Lady Leviathan, with respect. Entering a potential trap with only a vampire as backup seems unnecessarily risky. Perhaps we should summon additional forces from the underworld. Serafall turned to the guard with a smile. That somehow managed to be both sweet and terrifying. Merla, do you know why I brought only 2 guards to meet one of the oldest vampires in existence? The guard, Merla, shifted uncomfortably. 2. Maintain a low profile. Because, Serafall continued as if she hadn't heard, if Issei Hyodo decided to be our enemy rather than our temporary ally, no number of regular guards would make any difference. She patted the woman's shoulder. He's killed devil kings before. Haven't you, Issei? The casual revelation of his past hung in the air. Issei's expression remained impassive, betraying nothing of his thoughts on having ancient history so casually exposed. Different time, different circumstances, he replied evenly. The devil in question had violated his own oath and slaughtered an entire human village under my protection. See, he had his reasons, Serafall said brightly. Ancient beings are all about their personal codes. Much more reliable than politics, honestly. She turned back to the map. Now, about that stakeout. I assume you have surveillance equipment here. Issei regarded her thoughtfully. The Leviathan was far more dangerous than her appearance suggested, not simply because of her immense magical power, but because of her extraordinary intelligence hidden behind the childish facade. She had just demonstrated complete confidence in her assessment of his capabilities while simultaneously warning him that she was fully aware of his lethal potential. Second room on the left, he finally said. Help yourself to whatever equipment you require. I need to make preparations of my own. While Serafall busied herself with the surveillance gear, Issei retreated to a small, sparse room at the back of the safe house. Ancient symbols covered the walls, floor, and ceiling, protection spells from a dozen different magical traditions, layered over centuries. At the center stood a simple stone pedestal holding a single crystal vial of dark red liquid. He approached reverently, removing his jacket and rolling up his sleeve. With practiced precision, he sliced open his forearm and allowed his blood to drip into a shallow basin at the pedestal's base. The ancient symbols began to glow with crimson light as his blood flowed through channels carved into the stone. Blood of my blood, he intoned in a language that predated Latin, strength of my strength. The covenant renewed, the sacrifice accepted. The vial on the pedestal pulsed once with brilliant light. Issei lifted it carefully, removed the stopper, and drank the contents in a single swallow. Power surged through him immediately, raw, primal energy that made his eyes blaze and his skin radiate darkness rather than light. This was old magic, the kind modern vampires had forgotten or deliberately abandoned as primitive. For a brief moment, Issei Hyodo was not the controlled, sophisticated immortal who navigated modern society with ease. He was the ancient predator, the night's perfect hunter. The being that had inspired humanity's most primal fears. When the power surge stabilized, he closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. Control reasserted itself, the visible manifestations of power receding beneath his skin like ink sinking into parchment. By the time he returned to the main room, there was no outward sign of the ritual he had performed. Serafall, however, paused in her equipment preparation, her head tilting slightly as she studied him with newfound interest. My, she murmured, too quietly for her guards to hear. The old ways still have their uses, it seems. Issei met her gaze evenly. Some traditions endure because they work, and some because we're sentimental old creatures, she replied with unexpected frankness. Then, louder for the benefit of others, I've got thermal imaging, magical resonance detectors, and 16 different types of barrier spells ready to go. This is going to be the best stakeout ever. Wano Park at midnight was technically closed to the public. But supernatural beings rarely concerned themselves with such human restrictions. Issei and Serafall positioned themselves on a rooftop overlooking the likely target area, a small Shinto shrine that stood at the exact geometric point needed to complete the pentagram. The Leviathan had changed from her magical girl outfit into more practical attire, a form-fitting black bow dyesuit with subtle magical enhancements woven into the fabric. It was the first concrete evidence that she took the threat seriously. Her guards had been stationed at strategic points around the perimeter, monitoring different approach vectors. Your ritual, Serafall said without in the darkness. 9th century. Pre-Babylonian influence with Egyptian modifications. Issei glanced sideways at her, reassessing her knowledge base. Close. 7th century BCE, originally Sumerian with adaptations I made during the 3rd dynasty. She smiled, pleased with her near accuracy. Blood empowerment. Tea is considered crude by modern magical standards. Effective, though, modern practitioners lack context, Issei replied, his attention never leaving the shrine below. They see the surface mechanism. Blood as catalyst, without understanding the underlying principles of willing sacrifice and covenant renewal. The symbolic death and rebirth, Serafall nodded. The oldest magic always comes back to that pattern. She twirled a strand of hair thoughtfully. Devils understand sacrifice. We just prefer it to be someone else's. A comfortable silence fell between them, two ancient beings who rarely found equals to converse with. The night deepened around them, the city's ambient noise creating a backdrop of human life continuing in blissful ignorance of the supernatural forces at work. At precisely 2:17 a.m., both detected it simultaneously, a subtle distortion in the magical atmosphere, like a ripple across still water. Issei raised a hand in silent signal, receiving confirmation through his earpiece that the guards had also sensed the change. Approaching from the east, came the whispered report. Single entity, power level, fluctuating. Unable to get clear reading. Issei extended his senses, pushing past the limitations of physical perception. The magical signature was indeed erratic, spiking and dropping in a pattern that suggested either deliberate concealment or unstable power. Trap, Serafall whispered, her childish effect completely gone. The power fluctuation is too perfect. They're trying to draw us in. Issei nodded once. Agreed. Which means the real target is elsewhere. He closed his eyes, filtering through the magical frequencies surrounding them. There, northwest, half a kilometer. Faint but consistent power signature moving toward the shrine from the opposite direction. Serafall's eyes narrowed in concentration. I see it. Clever. They expected us to focus on the obvious approach. She tapped her communication device. Merla, Kira, maintain position. Monitor the eastern signature but do not engage. We're investigating a secondary target. They moved with supernatural speed across the rooftops, two shadows flowing like liquid darkness. Issei led the way, his movements precise and economical. Serafall matched him effortlessly, her smaller form belying her physical capabilities. They intercepted the secondary signature in a deserted place. Eye ground. A hooded figure carrying what appeared to be an unconscious person over one shoulder. Even at a distance, Issei could smell the distinctive scent of vampire blood. Another of yours, Serafall murmured. Still alive, from what I can sense. Issei nodded grimly. Capture, not kill. Questions first. They descended from opposite sides, cutting off escape routes. The hooded figure froze momentarily, then carefully lowered its burden to the ground. When it straightened, Issei caught a glimpse of a pale, expressionless face beneath the hood, too pale, with features too perfect to be human. Homunculus, he identified with narrowed eyes. Advanced craftsmanship. The artificial being regarded them without emotion, its movements mechanical yet fluid. When it spoke, its voice had the hollow quality of something mimicking human speech without understanding it. The pattern must be completed, it intoned. The awakening approaches. Blood of night, blood of flame, blood of divine. The Trinity converges. Who sent you? Serafall demanded, ice crystals forming in the air around her fingers. Who controls your design? The homunculus tilted its head at an unnatural angle. I am but vessel and voice. The master speaks through many. Without warning, it moved, faster than any artificial being should be capable of, lunging not toward them but toward the unconscious vampire on the ground. A ceremonial dagger appeared in its hand, the blade glowing with inscribed runes. Issei reacted instantly, his form blurred as he intercepted the homunculus, catching its wrist an inch before. The dagger could pierce the vampire's heart. The artificial being's strength was surprising, its arm continued pushing forward despite Issei's grip. Impressive craftsmanship indeed, Issei remarked coolly, applying more pressure until the homunculus's wrist joint began to crack. But ultimately flawed. With his free hand, he drove straight through the creature's chest, emerging with a pulsant crystalline object clutched in his fingers. The homunculus froze, its eyes widening in what almost resembled surprise. A philosopher's stone core, Issei noted, examining the glowing crystal. Outdated design. The resonance chamber is misaligned. The homunculus began to convulse, its form destabilizing as the animating force was removed. The pattern will complete, it gasped, its voice distorting. The Trinity will converge. The Master returns from beyond the. Its sentence remained unfinished as its body collapsed into a pile of rapidly decaying organic material. Within seconds, nothing remained but dust in the empty robe. Serafall approached, examining the crystal core in Issei's hand with professional interest. 19th century European alchemical design with, are those Taoist modifications? Curious hybrid. Someone with eclectic knowledge and access to restricted materials, Issei agreed, carefully wrapping the core in a silk cloth produced from an inner pocket. This will need proper analysis. They turned their attention to the unconscious vampire, a young female, turned within the last decade judging by her magical signature. Superficial wounds covered her body. Precise cuts that hadn't been meant to kill but to drain specific amounts of blood into collection vials, most of which were still attached to her arms and neck. Serafall knelt beside her, checking vital signs. She'll survive, but she's been heavily drugged. Some kind of magical suppression compound. Issei nodded, carefully removing the collection vials and storing them securely. They needed her alive for the ritual. Fresh blood drawn in specific quantities while the victim lives holds different magical properties than postmortem collection. The Eastern signature is retreating, see. Aim Merla's voice through their communication devices. Should we pursue? Negative, Serafall replied. Maintain observation only. We have what we need for now. Issei lifted the unconscious vampire with casual strength. We should return to the safe house. This was merely one component of their plan. The real target is still out there. As they made their way back across the city, a new tension existed between them, not adversarial. But the shared awareness that they had stumbled onto something far more complex than either had initially suspected. Blood of night, blood of flame, blood of divine, Serafall recited thoughtfully. Vampires, devils, and angels, most likely, Issei completed. The classical trinity of supernatural powers. A ritual requiring blood from all three major factions, she mused. That hasn't been attempted since. The celestial convergence of 1108, Issei finished. Which ended with 3 destroyed cities and the death of 2 seraphim. Serafall's expression darkened. If someone is attempting to recreate that ritual, we have a much bigger problem than a few disappearances. Indeed, Issei agreed, and whoever it is possesses knowledge Hat should have been erased from history. The implications hung between them as they traveled silently through the night. Old enemies forced into cooperation by a threat greater than their ancient enmity. The Vampire King and the Devil Queen, united by circumstance and a shared understanding of historical dangers most modern beings had forgotten. Dawn approached as they returned to the safe house. Issei secured the NA recovery room equipped with medical supplies and magical restraints, a precaution rather than a punishment, as newly awakened vampires often reacted violently to trauma. In the main room, he and Serafall spread their collected evidence across a large table: the blood vials, the philosopher's stone core, photographs of the ritual site, and samples of residual magical energy captured in specialized containers. The homunculus was a delivery system, not the mastermind, Issei observed, examining the core under a magical magnifying apparatus. See these inscription patterns. They're designed for one-way communication and limited autonomy. Serafall nodded, her fingers tracing patterns in the air as she analyzed the magical residue. The craftsmanship is impressive but deliberately antiquated, like someone trying to make their work appear to be from a specific historical period. Misdirection, Issei agreed, attempting to implicate a particular magical tradition or time period. They worked in comfortable silence for several hours, each bringing centuries of knowledge to the analysis. Occasionally, one would make an observation that sparked a connection for the other. Despite their different backgrounds and the historical enmity between their races, their intellectual approach to the problem created an unexpected synchronicity. As sunlight began to filter through the specially treated windows, designed to admit light while filtering the frequencies harmful to vampires, Serafall paused in her work, studying Issei with renewed curiosity. You're not affected by daylight, she observed. True daywalker status is exceedingly rare, even among vampire kings. Issei continued his examination of the blood samples. A combination of age, lineage, and certain rituals performed during the Tang dynasty. Not without cost. There's always a cost, she agreed, stretching her arms above her head in a surprisingly human gesture. Magic, power, longevity, nothing comes free. A soft chime interrupted them, the security system alerting them to the vampire's awakening. On a monitor, they could see her beginning to stir, confusion evident in her movements. I should handle this, Issei said, rising from the table. Newly awakened vampires respond better to the presence of their own kind. Serafall nodded. I'll continue the analysis. We need to determine the next potential target point if they're attempting to create a larger geometric pattern across the city. Issei paused at the doorway. You should rest. Even Maou requires sleep eventually. A genuine smile crossed Serafall's face. Not the theatrical cheerfulness of her public persona, but something smaller and more authentic. Worried about my well-being, Vampire King. How unexpectedly chivalrous. Pragmatic, he corrected, though the faintest hint of amusement touched his eyes. Your magical analysis is more precise than mine. I need you at full capacity. Of course, she replied, her smile widening slightly. Purely strategic concern. I'll rest when you return. As Issei left to attend to the rescued vampire, he found himself reflecting on the unexpected dynamic developing between himself and the Leviathan. Centuries of existence had taught him to expect betrayal, manipulation, and ulterior motives in all interactions with other powerful beings, particularly those from traditionally hostile factions. Yet something about Serafall Leviathan defied his usual categorization. Behind her deliberately disarming exterior and beneath her immense power lay a mind that Maou Serafall his own in both strategic depth and historical knowledge. It created a foundation for respect that transcended their inherent differences. A dangerous development, perhaps. But after 2 millennia of existence, danger had long since lost its deterrent effect. What remained rare and valuable was genuine intellectual engagement with an equal, something Issei had not experienced in longer than he cared to remember. The young vampire stirred as he entered the recovery room, her eyes flying open in panic when she registered the restraints. Issei immediately projected a calming aura, a subtle ability that few modern vampires had mastered. You're safe, he stated simply. The restraints are precautionary and temporary. You were attacked and drugged. Do you remember anything? The vampire, barely more than a girl in appearance, though likely in her 20s when turned, focused on him with difficulty. Recognition slowly dawned in her eyes. You're him, she whispered, awe overcoming fear. The Ancient One, the King without a court. Issei's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts on these titles. My name is Issei Hyodo. You were targeted as part of a ritual. I nay. To know everything you remember about your attackers. She swallowed hard, struggling to organize her thoughts. I was feeding in Wano, carefully, just as the council guidelines specify. One donor, willing, no excessive taking. Then, something struck me from behind. I remember a hooded figure, a voice that sounded wrong. Mechanical but wet somehow. She shuddered. They said I should be honored. That my blood would help awaken something. They called it the Master Beyond the Veil. Issei went still, centuries of discipline preventing any outward reaction to the phrase. The Master Beyond the Veil. A title he hadn't heard spoken aloud since the Crusades. Did they mention any specific ritual? Any particular purpose for your blood? She shook her head weakly. Only that it needed to be drawn while I was conscious. At specific intervals corresponding to my heartbeat. They had these instruments, ancient looking but somehow advanced. Her eyes widened suddenly. Wait. They did say something else. That mine was the blood of night, but they still needed the blood of flame and the blood of divine to complete the triangle. Issei nodded once. Rest now. You'll remain here until we're certain the danger has passed. This location is secure. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. My lord, the rumors about you. Are they true? That you walked with the first of our kind? That you've seen civilizations rise and fall? He regarded her silently for a moment. Rumors are rarely accurate. History is rarely kind. The truth lies somewhere in between. He paused. What is your name? Mizuki Tanaka, she replied. I was turned 9 years ago. Sleep, Mizuki Tanaka. When you wake, food will be provided. Your maker will be informed of your safety. In the hallway outside, Issei found Serafall waiting. Her expression serious. The master beyond the veil, she said without preamble. You recognized the title. I saw it in your eyes. Issei considered deflection, then discarded the idea. The situation had progressed beyond the point where withholding information served any purpose. It's a reference to an entity sealed away during the early medieval period, he explained. A being that existed in the interstices between dimensions, capable of manipulating reality in ways that threatened the stability of all realms. I know the historical reference, Serafall replied. What I don't know is your personal connection to it. Your reaction was specific. Their eyes met in silent evaluation, two ancient beings weighing trust against caution. Finally, Issei spoke. I was part of the sealing ritual. One of 7 beings, 2 vampires, 2 devils, 2 angels, and 1 human mage, who created the dimensional barrier that imprisoned the entity. The ritual required, he paused, significant sacrifice. The lost city of Candelori, Serafall breathed, pieces falling into place. The historical records claim it was destroyed in a territorial dispute between vampires and werewolves. A convenient cover story, Issei confirmed. The truth was deemed too dangerous for general knowledge. If someone is attempting to reverse the sealing ritual, they would need blood from representatives of each participating faction, vampire, devil, and angel, along with specific geometric alignments corresponding to the Oriera Fall added, her mind racing ahead. Which would be 7 points forming a septagram across the city, Issei confirmed. We've identified 5. 2 remain. Serafall's expression hardened with determination. Then we have work to do. I need to contact the angel faction representative immediately. They need to be warned. Agreed. I'll continue analyzing the ritual components we've collected. There may be clues to the mastermind's identity. As they returned to the main room, the dynamic between them had shifted subtly but significantly. No longer merely reluctant allies of convenience, they were now bound by shared knowledge of an ancient threat, one that transcended the traditional boundaries between their kinds. The Vampire King and the Devil Queen, united against a darkness older than either of their ancient races. As morning fully claimed the sky outside, they worked in focused harmony, each bringing centuries of knowledge and power to bear against a threat few living beings even remembered existed. In the shadowed corners of Tokyo, unknown to either of them, 7 hooded figures gathered around a pulsing geometric pattern inscribed on stone. At its center lay 3 vials, one filled with dark crimson liquid, one with brilliant scarlet, and the third empty, awaiting its divine contents. The Ancient One has taken our bait, spoke the central figure, voice distorted beyond recognition. The game progresses as planned. And the Leviathan? Asked another. An unexpected variable, but not an unwelcome one. 2 pieces moving together are easier to capture than those moving separately. The pattern beneath them pulsed with sickly light, casting their shadows in 7 directions simultaneously. Prepare the final phase. The awakening approaches. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Frost and Blood. N filtered through Tokyo's skyline as Issei meticulously arranged the evidence across the safehouse's central table. Blood samples, ritual components, and the recovered philosopher's stone formed a constellation of clues that remained stubbornly disconnected. He'd spent hours analyzing each item, searching for the signature that would identify their adversary. After 2 millennia of existence, patience had become his most refined skill. Yet time was conspicuously absent from their current equation. Fascinating technique, Serafall commented, observing from the doorway. She had abandoned her magical girl attire completely, now dressed in a simple blue blouse and dark pants that somehow managed to look both casual and elegant. Blood chromatography isn't something I'd expect a vampire to master. Rather scientific for an ancient one. Issei didn't look up from the microscope he was peering through. Adaptation is survival. Those who cling to outdated methodologies eventually become outdated themselves. Says the vampire who still performs blood rituals from the Bronze Age, she quipped, approaching the table with silent steps. Some traditions endure because they work, he replied, the faintest hint of amusement coloring his voice. Others because we haven't found anything better. He straightened and gestured to the philosopher's stone. The core construction contains NTS of 9 different magical traditions. Whoever created this has extensive knowledge of global occult practices. Serafall leaned closer, her scent, winter pine and something older, like glacial ice, momentarily distracting him. The crystalline structure reminds me of Mesopotamian soul-binding techniques, but the runic inscriptions are definitely Norse. She traced a finger just above the surface. And these? Pure Atlantean. Precisely. A deliberate hodgepodge designed to obscure the creator's actual specialty. Issei crossed to a different table where a holographic map of Tokyo hovered. Quote, I've been mapping the disappearance sites against historical ley line charts. The pattern is forming a modified Seal of Solomon, but with specific deviations that suggest a purpose beyond mere summoning. A breaking rather than a calling. Serafall mused, studying the projection. The master beyond the veil was sealed, not banished. They're attempting to shatter a dimensional barrier, not open a conventional portal. Issei nodded once, which makes the next targets predictable by geometric necessity. Here and here, he indicated 2 points on opposite sides of the city. The eastern point Ntersects with a minor shrine dedicated to Inari. The western point falls within Yoyogi Park. 2 targets, limited resources, Serafall summarized. We need to. A discreet chime interrupted her, alerting them to movement at the safehouse's outer perimeter. Issei gestured toward the security monitor, which displayed a slender female figure approaching the main entrance with confident strides. Despite the modern clothing, an impeccably tailored burgundy suit, her bearing spoke of aristocratic heritage and old-world mannerisms. Elmenhild Karnstein, Issei identified, his tone revealing nothing of his thoughts on her unexpected arrival. House Karnstein has maintained a complex relationship with my lineage for 7 centuries. Should I make myself scarce? Serafall asked, raising an eyebrow. Devil presence might complicate your vampire politics. On the contrary, Issei replied, moving toward the entrance. Your presence will provide valuable insight into how she responds. House Karnstein has always positioned itself as the most staunchly anti-devil faction within vampire society. He opened the door before Elmenhild could announce herself. She paused mid-step, momenta. Wryly surprised before recovering with practiced grace. Her features were classically beautiful in the way only vampire nobility could achieve, perfect symmetry touched by an otherworldly quality that humans found both attractive and unsettling. Lord Hyodo, she greeted in accented Japanese, executing a formal curtsy that belonged to another century. Forgive the unannounced intrusion. Matters of grave importance necessitated direct communication. Elmenhild, Issei acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. Your timing is either remarkably fortunate or suspiciously convenient. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly at his tone. The council sent me to. She stopped abruptly as she detected another presence. The temperature between them dropped perceptibly as her gaze fixed on Serafall. You harbor a devil in your sanctuary. The question carried centuries of ingrained disdain. I harbor nothing, Issei corrected mildly. Lady Leviathan and I are conducting a joint investigation into matters that concern both our factions. Elmenhild's perfect composure cracked momentarily. Lady Leviathan, one of the 4 Satans. She recovered quickly, her expression smoothing into a diplomatic mask. I see. Events are more serious than the council realized if such unprecedented cooperation has become necessary. Serafall approached with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Elmenhild Karnstein, your family's contribution to European literature is fascinating, especially how your great-grandfather convinced that human author to write your family into his vampire novel. Such an effective way to hide in plain sight. The vampire noblewoman stiffened, clearly uncomfortable with how much the devil knew about her lineage. The council has authorized me to provide whatever assistance Lord Hyodo requires in resolving the current crisis, she stated formally, redirecting the conversation. Additional disappearances have been reported throughout Europe. Are more vampires of significant bloodline taken under identical circumstances? Issei gestured for her to enter fully. What else has the council withheld? They didn't withhold information, Elmenhild insisted, stepping into the safe house with measured grace. The pattern only became clear within the last 12 hours. All victims were taken while isolated, all had blood drawn in precise quantities. And all disappeared without triggering proximity wards or defensive measures. Issei noted, or exceptional skill at circumventing them. Both. We believe, Elmenhild confirmed, her Z continually drifting toward Serafall with poorly concealed suspicion. The council has evidence suggesting involvement from a rogue faction of our own kind. Ancient bloodlines thought extinct after the Purification Wars. Issei's expression revealed nothing, but Serafall caught the subtle tension in his shoulders. The Crimson Dynasty? He asked quietly. Elmenhild nodded once, her golden eyes watchful. Remnants, at least. Artifacts bearing their insignia were found at 2 European sites. That's impossible, Issei stated flatly. The Crimson Dynasty ended in 1241. I personally witnessed their extermination. Perhaps not as thoroughly as believed, Elmenhild suggested delicately. Blood has ways of persisting, as you well know. The subtle challenge in her tone was unmistakable. Serafall observed the exchange with interest, noting the layered history and unspoken politics flowing beneath the surface. The Crimson Dynasty, she interjected. The vampire faction that attempted to seize control of Eastern Europe during the Mongol invasions, if I recall correctly. Known for blood rituals that bent reality itself. Both vampires turned to her with matching expressions of surprise at her historical knowledge. Issei recovered first, inclining his head in acknowledgement. Their ambition exceeded their wisdom, he said simply. Their rituals drew power from mass suffering. They manipulated the Mongol advance to create fields of pain they could harvest. The combined forces of 7 vampire houses put an end to their experiments. And their bloodline, Elmenhild added pointedly. Or so the official records state. An uncomfortable silence fell between them, heavy with implication. Serafall moved to the evidence table, deliberately changing the focus. If the Crimson Dynasty is involved, that would explain the blood extraction methodology we've observed, she noted, gesturing to the samples. Classic Carpathian technique, modified for precision collection rather than mere feeding. Elmenhild approached cautiously, her innate distrust of devils visibly warring with professional curiosity. May I? She asked, gesturing to the microscope. Issei nodded once. As Elmenhild bent to examine the blood samples, he exchanged a meaningful glance with Serafall. Something about the Karnstein representatives' arrival and information felt too convenient, too neatly aligned with their investigation. Whether she was deliberately misleading them or being used as an unwitting pawn remained to be seen. Curious, Elmenhild murmured as she straightened. The blue D shows signs of alchemical preparation. Certain compounds added post-extraction that would make it suitable for specific ritual purposes. She turned to Issei. Similar compounds were identified in the European cases. The Council's researchers believe they're components for a grand ritual of some kind. We've identified the pattern, Issei informed her, indicating the holographic map. A modify D seal of Solomon using Tokyo's ley line network as an amplification grid. 2 targets remain to complete the geometric structure. Elmenhild studied the map with narrowed eyes. A breaking seal, not a containment. They're attempting to shatter barriers between dimensions. She looked up sharply. This goes beyond vampire politics. Whatever they're trying to release. We know what they're trying to release, Serafall interrupted. Her typically cheerful demeanor completely absent. The master beyond the veil. An entity sealed away in the medieval period that exists in the spaces between dimensions. If Elmenhild was surprised by this information, she concealed it well. Then we face a greater threat than merely rogue vampires. The Council will want to. The Council will do nothing, Issei stated with quiet authority. Not yet. Information containment is essential until we identify all involved parties. If word spreads prematurely, it could accelerate their timeline or drive them deeper into hiding. Elmenhild's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of polite skepticism. With respect, Lord Hyodo, the Council has resources that could assist. Additional manpower, access to restricted archives. The Council also has leaks, political agendas, and factions that would exploit this situation for advantage, Issei countered. You know this better than most. Given House Karnstein's historical role as information brokers. A flash of something, annoyance or perhaps appreciation, crossed Elmenhild's face before she inclined her head in concession. As you wish. How may I be of service in your investigation? The European disappearances, Serafall said before Issei could respond. Were any non-vampires targeted? Devils, perhaps, or angels? Elmenhild hesitated fractionally. 2 unexplained disappearances of minor devil nobility were reported in Vienna last month. The council dismissed any connection, given historical animosities. They need blood from all three major factions. Issei explained. Vampire, devil, and angel. The ritual requires representatives from the original sealing. Which brings us to our immediate problem, Serafall continued seamlessly. 2 remaining target sites, 3 of us. We need to split our resources effectively. Elmenhild straightened, her aristocratic bearing becoming more pronounced. I volunteer to monitor the shrine location. My family has extensive experience with Asian spiritual sites from our expansion efforts in the 18th century. Actually, Issei countered smoothly, I have a different task in mind for you. The blood samples contain trace elements suggesting Kyoto as the origin point for the ritual components. We need someone to investigate the supernatural community there, identify the source. The vampire noblewoman's expression flickered with momentary displeasure before settling back into diplomatic neutrality. Kyoto. That would place me quite far from the active investigation. It would place you exactly where we need expert assistance, Serafall replied with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. Vampire nobility will have better access to certain circles than either a recognized Maou or a vampire king whose appearance would cause immediate attention. The strategic sidelining was obvious to all three, but Elmenhild was too politically adept to protest directly. Of course, she conceded with practiced grace. I shall depart immediately. How shall I communicate my findings? Issei produced a small crystal from an inner pocket. Blood-bonded communication stone. Secure and untraceable. Simply speak my name while holding it, and I'll hear you regardless of distance. Elmenhild accepted the crystal, her fingers brushing against his momentarily. An ancient method. Effective, if somewhat intimate. The last word carried a subtle weight that didn't escape Serafall's notice. Safe travels, Lady Karnstein, Issei said formally, effectively dismissing her. The council chose well in sending you. After Elmenhild departed, Serafall turned to him with raised eyebrows. Well, that was illuminating. She's either working with our culprit, TS, or has her own agenda that coincidentally aligns with their activities. Both are possible, Issei acknowledged. House Karnstein has maintained its position through careful information management and strategic alliances. They'd sacrifice anything for advantage. You don't trust her. I don't trust anyone who arrives with precisely the information we need at exactly the moment we need it, he replied evenly. However, sending her to Kyoto serves multiple purposes. It gives her a task important enough to satisfy the council while keeping her away from our immediate investigation. And if she is involved with our ritual happy friends, then she'll lead us directly to their Kyoto connections, Issei concluded. Either way, we gain information. Serafall's lips curved into a genuine smile. Manipulative, pragmatic, and Suo, for a vampire, you're surprisingly good company. I'll take that as a compliment, coming from a devil, he replied, the faintest hint of amusement touching his eyes. So, she said, returning to the map, 2 targets, 2 of us. Straightforward enough. Unfortunately not, Issei disagreed. The timing is too convenient. Elmenhild's arrival, the clear identification of the final 2 points, it suggests our opponents are aware of our investigation and adapting accordingly. A trap, then, almost certainly, which means neither location is likely the actual target. Serafall studied the map thoughtfully. If the Seal of Solomon is a misdirection, what's the actual pattern they're creating? Issei manipulated the holographic display, zooming out to show a wider area of Japan. If we consider the Tokyo points as merely part of a larger geometric structure. His fingers traced lines connecting the known points, then extending outward. The pattern suggests a focus point here. He indicated a location northwest of Tokyo. Mount Takao, Serafall identified. A power nexus where several major ley lines converge. And a historic site where boundary rituals were performed during the Heian period, Issei added. The perfect location to begin unraveling dimensional barriers. Serafall nodded decisively. Mount Takao it is, then. Should we bring snacks? I'm thinking magical containment fields and maybe some tactical explosives count as snacks for this kind of outing. Despite the gravity of the situation, Issei found him self-appreciating her ability to blend strategic thinking with disarming humor. I have equipment suitable for interdimensional containment in the eastern storeroom. Help yourself to whatever you require. As they prepared for the confrontation ahead, Issei found himself watching Serafall with growing curiosity. The Maou moved with efficient grace as she selected equipment and prepared magical components. Her cheerful facade occasionally slipping to reveal the battle-hardened strategist beneath. Despite centuries of ingrained prejudice against devils, he found her competence and intelligence oddly compelling. "You're staring," she commented without looking up from the containment spell she was inscribing. "Something troubling you about my runic calligraphy? I know it's a bit neoclassical for traditional tastes." "Your technique is flawless," he replied honestly. "I was merely observing that your public persona and private capabilities represent a strategic deception few would maintain so consistently." She glanced up, a genuine smile replacing her usual theatrical cheer. "Says the immortal predator who dresses like a GQ model and attends human university classes for intellectual stimulation. We all have our masks." "Vampire King." "Indeed," he acknowledged, "though some are more elaborate than others. The more powerful you become, the more important the disguise," she replied with unexpected seriousness. "You understand that better than most." Their eyes met briefly across the room, Crimson Vampire against Ice Blue Devil, in a moment of mutual recognition that transcended their species' ancient enmity. Then Serafall's expression brightened again, the serious moment passing like a cloud over the sun. "All packed and ready for our mountain adventure," she declared, hefting a bag of magical equipment. "Though I'm still disappointed about the snacks situation. Even ancient beings need proper nutrition, you know." Issei raised an eyebrow. "There's a supply of B-Lud in the refrigeration unit and several human energy bars in the cabinet." "See, you do care about proper nutrition," she teased. "There's hope for you yet." Mount Takao loomed before them, its forested slopes deceptively peaceful in the afternoon sun. They had approached from the east, avoiding the popular hiking trails and tourist areas that dotted the western face of the mountain. Issei moved with silent efficiency through the underbrush, his senses extended to detect any magical or physical traps. Serafall followed close behind, her typically bouncy demeanor replaced by the focused alertness of a predator. "The barrier begins 300 meters ahead," Issei noted, pausing beside an ancient cedar. "Recently established but using traditional methodology. Shinto purification. Techniques layered with something older." Serafall knelt, placing her palm against the ground. Frost spread outward from her touch, creating an intricate pattern that glowed faintly blue. "They've rerouted the natural ley line flow," she observed. "Subtle enough that most practitioners wouldn't notice, but they're channeling energy toward the summit." "Preparation for a major working," Issei agreed. "The question is whether they're at the implementation stage or still gathering components." A distant bird call drew his attention. 3 notes, then 2, then 4. Unnaturally precise. Serafall noticed his sudden stillness. "Signal," she whispered. Issei nodded once. "Vampire hunting communication. 18th century European origin, still used by certain traditional factions." His eyes narrowed. "They know we're here. So much for the element of surprise," Serafall murmured. "Plan B. We maintain our approach but abandon stealth. Let them see us coming. It may reveal their numbers and positions." She smiled, a predatory expression that transformed her childlike features into something ancient and dangerous. "I do enjoy the direct approach occasionally." They moved openly now, following the main path toward the barrier. Issei's hand rested casually on the hilt of his sword, while Serafall summoned a small ice crystal that orbited her right hand like a miniature satellite. A prepared spell ready for instant deployment. The barrier manifested as a shimmering veil stretched between 2 massive torii gates that hadn't been there minutes before. Behind it, a figure awaited them, humanoid but clearly not human. Its proportions subtly wrong in ways that triggered instinctive unease. When it spoke, its voice resonated with mechanical precision. The Ancient One approaches with Frost Queen beside. The pattern adjusts accordingly. Another homunculus, Issei identified quietly. More sophisticated than the previous one. Blood of night, blood of flame, convergence imminent. The artificial being continued. "Your presence was calculated, your actions predicted. All serves the awakening." Serafall stepped forward, her magical aura intensifying until the air around her crystallized. "Who sent you? Who orchestrates this convergence?" The homunculus tilted its head at an unnatural angle. "Many voices, one purpose. The master calls from beyond the veil, and faithful servants answer." It raised its arms, revealing intricate runic tattoos covering its unnaturally pale skin. Your blood will complete the Trinity. Willing or unwilling, it matters not. Without warning, the barrier between the Torii gates pulsed with crimson light, then inverted. Instead of blocking their path, it expanded outward in a wave of force that engulfed them both. Issei's centuries of combat experience triggered an instantaneous response. He drew his sword in a fluid motion, the ancient blade slicing through the magical energy. Serafall reacted with equal speed, her orbiting ice crystal expanding into a hemispherical shield that deflected the remaining energy. Clever, she commented, her voice cooling to match her power. A barrier designed to capture rather than repel. One of many surprises, Frost Queen. The homunculus replied. As it spoke, the forest around them came alive with movement. 6 more artificial beings emerged from concealment, each bearing the same runic tattoos but varying in physical design. Some appeared almost human, others deliberately monstrous. A welcoming committee, Issei observed calmly. How considerate. The master's design accounts for resistance, stated the lead homunculus. Your combined strength was anticipated. Countermeasures were implemented. As if on cue, the 7 artificial beings began a synchronized chant in any human civilization. The tattoos on their bodies glowed with increasing intensity, drawing power from the redirected ley lines beneath the mountain. Issei recognized the incantation a moment too late. Dimensional anchor spell, he warned Serafall. They're binding us to this location. The air thickened around them as reality itself seemed to congeal. Teleportation, mist form, dimensional shifting. All modes of escape were being systematically closed off by the ancient spell. Issei had encountered similar magic only twice in his long existence, both times with catastrophic results. Serafall's response was immediate and devastating. The temperature dropped so rapidly that sound itself seemed to crystallize in the air. In a single fluid movement, she slammed her staff into the ground, sending a wave of absolute zero temperature outward in a perfect circle. Cocytus break, she intoned, her voice resonating with power. The freezing wave struck the homunculi, instantly transmuting them into brittle statues of ice. But instead of shattering, the frozen figures began to glow from within, their runic tattoos burning through the ice with hellish light. Frost cannot bind what never truly lived, the lead homunculus stated, its voice undistorted despite its frozen state. Your power is expected, calculated, countered. Issei moved in perfect concert with Serafall's attack, his sword becoming a blur of motion as he targeted the glowing runes on each frozen figure. The ancient blade sang through the air, slicing through ice and the magic contained within with surgical precision. These bindings, he stated calmly as he severed a complex runic cluster on the 3rd homunculus, are Babylonian in origin but modified with elements of Far Eastern constraint magic. Impressive adaptation. Thanks for the academic assessment, Serafall replied, gathering another spell between her hands. Very helpful while we're being ambushed. Despite her words, Issei noted that she was systematically targeting the same runic patterns he was attacking, their efforts complementing each other without need for explicit coordination. It created an efficient rhythm to their counterotic that spoke of compatible combat philosophies. The dimensional anchor spell weakened as they systematically destroyed its anchor points, but the homunculi were far from defeated. The ice encasing them began to crack and split, revealing bodies that were transforming, limbs elongating into blade-like appendages, torsos splitting open to reveal secondary attack organs, heads reconfiguring into more bestial forms. Second stage activation, Issei identified. These aren't simple messenger constructs, they're purpose-built combat units. The pattern must be completed, the lead homunculus read as its body finished its grotesque transformation. Resistance is accounted for. Violence is anticipated. Your blood will be harvested regardless. All 7 transformed homunculi attacked simultaneously, moving with unnatural speed and coordination. Their limbs functioned as weapons, bladed, barbed, or weighted for maximum damage. More disturbing was their perfect tactical awareness, each positioning to exploit potential weaknesses in the defensive perimeter Issei and Serafall had established. Issei met the assault with millennia of combat experience. His sword moved in patterns développé. Before human civilization established written language, targeting the vital magical confluences that animated the artificial beings. 3 homunculi converged on him from different angles, their acts synchronized to limit his defensive options. He responded by shifting into a combat style none had witnessed in 15 centuries, the blood petal dance of the Tang dynasty, a technique that transformed defense into simultaneous offense through precision footwork and blade control. Where his sword touched the homunculi, it left not simple cuts but precisely targeted severances that disrupted their magical cohesion. Their coordination suggests a hive mind architecture, he called to Serafall as he separated the arm of one attacker with clinical precision. Find the control node. Serafall, meanwhile, faced her own trio of opponents with the devastating efficiency that had made the Leviathan name feared throughout multiple dimensions. Gone was any trace of the childish magical girl P. Ursina. In its place stood a combat veteran whose power had helped reshape the underworld. Working on it, she replied, her hands weaving complex patterns that manifested as geometric ice constructs. Their magical signature converges somewhere above us. The 7th homunculus, the leader, had maintained its position by the Torii gates, its body continuing to transform into something increasingly less humanoid. Tendrils of dark energy extended from its core, connecting to the 6 combatants like puppeteer's strings. There, Serafall identified, sending a spear of concentrated cold directly toward the central figure. The leader homunculus caught the ice spear bare-handed, the freezing energy dissipating harmlessly against its transformed flesh. The Frost Queen's tactics are documented, it stated flatly. Countermeasures have been implemented for all known devil abilities. How about unknown ones? Serafall countered, a dangerous smile playing across her lips. She raised both hands, ice crystals forming between her fingers. Absolute domain. Cocytus breath. The air itself seemed to solidify as cold beyond mortal comprehension radiated from her slender form. This was no freezing spell but the manifestation of a Mao's true power, the authority to impose her dominion over a fundamental aspect of reality itself. Issei recognized the technique immediately and adapted his strategy accordingly. As the wave of absolute cold expanded outward, he activated one of his own ancient abilities, Blood Veil, creating a protective crimson mist that surrounded his body just as the freezing effect reached him. The homunculi, despite their magical resistance, found themselves unable to counter this level of power. Their bodies crystallized from the inside out, the very magical energy animating them freezing solid. The control tendrils connecting them to their leader shattered like glass, falling in glittering shards to the forest floor. Only the leader remained partially mobile, its transformation accelerating in response to the threat. Contingency protocols activated, it announced, its voice distorting as its mouth transformed into something inhuman. Sacrifice sequence initiated. Before either could react, the homunculus plunged a hand into its own chest, extracting what appeared to be a pulsing crystal similar to the philosopher's stone they had recovered previously. With mechanical precision, it crushed the crystal in its grip, releasing a blinding flash of magical energy. When the light faded, the homunculus was gone, not destroyed, but transported elsewhere through some form of emergency evacuation spell. In its place remained a pulsing magical construct that expanded rapidly, forming a dome of energy over the entire area. Containment field, Issei identified immediately. They're trying to delay us. Serafall examined the energy pattern with narrowed eyes. More than that, this is a blood lock. It requires specific blood sacrifice to dismantle safely. Otherwise, she gestured to the dome's surface, where complex runic patterns were forming. Otherwise, it collapses inward with enough force to reduce everything inside to component atoms. Issei approached the edge of the dome, studying the runic patterns with clinical detachment. Carpathian blood magic fused with Kabbalistic binding techniques. Sophisticated work. He turned to Serafall. Can you identify the trigger mechanism? She moved beside him, their shoulders nearly touching as they both examined the magical construct. Here and here, she indicated, pointing to specific rune clusters. Classic Enochian structure with a Sumerian activation sequence. They've engineered it to require blood from both of us to attempting to force our participation in their ritual, Issei concluded. Crude but potentially effective. Options? Serafall asked, all business now that they faced a concrete magical challenge. Issei considered for precisely 3 seconds. We give them what they want, with modifications. He drew his ancient blade again, this time slicing his own palm with surgical precision. Dark blood welled from the wound, thicker and more viscous than human vitae. The binding requires untreated blood, he explained. But vampire kings have certain advantages when it comes to blood manipulation. Understanding dawned in Serafall's eyes. You can alter your blood's magical properties. Precisely. His eyes glowed crimson as he focused his power, the blood on his palm shifting visibly as he infused it with specific magical intent. Devil blood WOU. LD complement the adjustment, create a synchronized counter-resonance. Without hesitation, Serafall created a small ice dagger and made a precise cut across her own palm. Her blood glowed with faint blue luminescence. The inherent power of a Maou manifesting physically. Counter-resonance it is, she agreed. Though I should warn you, blood mixing creates certain mystical connections that can have interesting side effects. Under normal circumstances, I would avoid such complications, Issei acknowledged. But our options are limited by both time and circumstance. They placed their edging palms against the two trigger points simultaneously. Their blood flowed into the runic channels, illuminating the complex pattern from within. As their vitae mingled within the magical construct, Issei felt an unexpected sensation, a psychic resonance that momentarily connected his consciousness to Serafall's. Images flickered through his mind. Ice palaces in the underworld, battlefield scenes from the Devil's Civil War. A young devil girl who resembled Serafall watching her with admiring eyes, the weight of responsibility settled across her shoulders like a physical burden. Emotions accompanied the images, determination, loneliness, the constant vigilance required of leadership, and beneath it all, a surprisingly genuine joy in existence that had survived centuries of political maneuvering. From Serafall's momentary widening of eyes, he suspected she was experiencing something similar, glimpses of his long existence flowing unbidden between them. The connection lasted only seconds. Before the containment field responded to their manipulated blood, instead of dissolving harmlessly as intended, it collapsed outward, dispersing its energy away from them in a controlled release. As the magical energy dissipated, Serafall regarded him with newfound curiosity. That was illuminating. An unexpected side effect, Issei agreed neutrally, though internally he was still processing the brief but intimate glimpse into her existence. The blood connection should fade within hours. Should, she repeated with a raised eyebrow. But magical theory isn't always reliable when mixing the blood of ancient beings, is it? Quote. Before he could respond, a distant explosion drew their attention to the summit of Mount Takao. A column of sickly purple light erupted skyward, punching through the clouds and creating a swirling vortex in the atmosphere above. They were never after us, Issei realized, his perfect memory reconstructing the sequence of events. The homunculi, the barrier, the blood lock, all designed to delay rather than capture. While the real ritual proceeded elsewhere, Serafall finished grimly. We need to move, now. They abandoned caution, racing toward the summit with supernatural speed. The forest blurred around them as they moved faster than human eyes could track, navigating the terrain with the efficiency of predators. As they approached the source of the light column, the air grew thick with magical residue, the unmistakable aftermath of a major ritual working. The clearing near the summit contained the remnants of an elaborate ritual circle, its components still smoking with residual energy. 7 stone pillars arranged in a perfect heptagon surrounded a central altar, upon which lay 3 empty vials, their contents evidently used in whatever working had just been completed. We're too late, Serafall stated, kneeling to examine the still-hot ritual markings. This is Crimson Dynasty methodology, without question. The blood collection, the geometric precision, the layered activation sequence. Issei circled the ritual site, his enhanced senses cataloging every detail. Not just Crimson Dynasty, he corrected, his voice taking on a rare edge of concern. This incorporates elements of angelic binding magic and devil containment protocols. Whoever designed this has intimate knowledge of all 3 factions' most guarded techniques. Which shouldn't be possible, Serafall noted, rising to her feet. Even as a Maou, I don't have access to the highest tier of angelic magical theory. Nor should any living vampire possess Crimson Dynasty techniques and modern devil magic, Issei agreed. Unless the master beyond the veil is already influencing events from its prison, Serafall completed his thought. aching through weakened points in the dimensional barrier to guide its servants. The implications hung heavily between them. If the entity they had helped seal away centuries ago was already capable of affecting the physical world, the situation was far more dire than either had initially assessed. Issei knelt beside one of the stone pillars, examining a symbol carved into its base. This is a locator mark, he identified. Part of a larger working designed to identify and target specific individuals. For what purpose? Serafall asked, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. To find the remaining original sealers, Issei replied grimly. Those of us still living who participated in the original imprisonment of the Master beyond the veil. Our blood would be most effective in breaking the seal we helped create. How many remain? 3, to my knowledge. Myself, Gabriel of the Seraphim, and he hesitated, and Yusaka of the Kyoto yokai, he finished. The nine-tailed fox inherited the position from her ancestor who participated in the original sealing. Serafall's eyes widened. Yusaka, then Elmenhild, was deliberately directed to Kyoto, where she might inadvertently lead our enemies directly to their next target, Issei confirmed, already moving toward the forest's edge. We need to reach Kyoto immediately. Serafall nodded, her playful demeanor completely absent in the face of the escalating threat. I can create a transportation circle, but it will take time to establish the necessary permissions for crossing into yokai territory. We don't have time for diplomatic protocols, Issei stated flatly. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an ancient scroll case made of polished bone. I have something more direct. He unrolled the scroll, revealing text written in a language that predated human civilization. With practiced efficiency, he pricked his finger and let a single drop of blood fall onto the central character. The scroll began to glow with crimson light, the text rearranging itself into a complex transportation circle. Blood rite of passage, Serafall identified with genuine surprise. I didn't think any of those still existed outside secured vaults. Benefits of a very long existence, Issei replied. This one was granted to me by the first yokai conclave in 811 CE, in recognition of CES rendered during the Yukai Tengu conflicts. The transportation circle expanded around them, ancient magic responding to the blood of one who held legitimate rite of passage. As the spell activated, Serafall gave Issei a sidelong glance. You continue to surprise me, Vampire King, she admitted. Most of your kind boast endlessly of their ancient connections and powers. Those who truly possess power rarely feel the need to proclaim it, he replied simply as the transportation magic imsoned light. The world dissolved around them, reality itself bending as the ancient spell transported them across hundreds of kilometers in an instant. When the light faded, they stood in a secluded garden surrounded by cherry trees in full bloom, suspiciously so, given the season. The air hummed with magical energy. The boundary between the human world and the yokai realm tissue thin in this sacred space. A traditional Japanese palace rose before them, its architecture dating back to the Heian period but maintained in perfect condition. Guards materialized immediately, fox spirits in human form, their golden eyes and subtle fox ears revealing their true nature. Intruders in the inner sanctuary, called the lead guard, magical energy gathering around his hands. Identify yourselves or be destroyed. Issei stepped forward, the scroll still open in his hands. I invoke blood rite of passage granted by the conclave of 811. I am Issei Hyodo, known in that time as Crimson Shadow. I seek audience with Lady Yusaka on matters concerning the dimensional seal. The guards exchanged alarmed glances at the mention of the dimensional seal, clearly a term that carried significant weight. The leader approached cautiously, examining the scroll with narrowed eyes. The blood rite is valid, he confirmed reluctantly. But it speaks nothing of bringing a devil into our sanctuary. His suspicious gaze fixed on Serafall. She is Serafall Leviathan, Maou of the underworld, Issei stated formally. And necessary to the matter at hand. I vouch for her presence with my own standing. The guard's expression suggested he found this highly irregular but was bound by protocol to accept it. Wait here, he ordered. Before disappearing in a flash of fox fire, Serafall moved beside Issei, speaking quietly. Your relationship with the yokai seems complicated. Most relationships spanning 12 centuries are. He replied simply. Before she could inquire further, the garden transformed around them. The cherry blossoms intensified, their petals swirling in patterns too precise to be natural. The very air seemed to thicken with supernatural energy as a new presence made itself known. A woman appeared on the palace steps, tall and elegantly beautiful, with golden eyes and flowing blonde hair that reached her waist. She wore traditional Japanese robes of the finest silk, patterned with images of sacred trees and foxes that seemed to move subtly across the fabric. Behind her, 9 magnificent fox tails swayed gently, each tipped with golden light. "Issei Hyodo," she greeted, her voice musical yet carrying unmistakable authority. 12 decades since you last stood in my garden. You appear unchanged, as always. Lady Yasaka, Issei replied with a formal bow. I regret that circumstances rather than courtesy bring me to your door. Her golden gaze shifted to Serafall, assessment clear in her expression. A Maou of the underworld. Your companions grow increasingly eclectic, old friend. Lady Yasaka, Serafall greeted with perfect formal courtesy that belied her usual exuberant persona. Your reputation for wisdom and power extends even to the deepest levels of the underworld. I am honored to stand in your presence. A slight smile touched Yasaka's lips. Well spoken for a devil. Perhaps politics has improved your kind's diplomatic skills since last we negotiated territorial boundaries. Her expression sobered as she returned her attention to Issei. You mentioned the dimensional seal. I assume this is not a historical discussion. The seal weakens, Issei confirmed gravely. Attempts are being made to break it completely. Evidence suggests you might be targeted as one of the remaining original sealers. Yasaka's 9 tails stilled, the only indication of her concern. Come inside, she commanded. This conversation requires privacy and sake. Not necessarily in that order. As they followed the 9-tailed fox leader into her palace, Issei felt Serafall's questioning gaze. The relationship between himself and Yasaka clearly intrigued her, though she maintained professional composure in the presence of the yokai leader. The interior of the palace reflected Yasaka's dual nature as both traditional shrine maiden and powerful supernatural entity. Ancient artifacts and modern magical monitoring equipment coexisted in carefully organized spaces. Shikigami, paper spirits, flitted through the air, carrying messages and maintaining magical barriers. Yasaka led them to a private chamber where a low table had already been prepared with an ornate sake set. As they knelt on silk cushions, she poured the rice wine with the perfect grace of centuries of practice. Now, she said after they had observed the formal ritual of sharing sake, tell me what threatens the seal that has held for nearly a millennium. Issei explained their investigation concisely, the disappearances, the blood collection, the ritual components, and the disturbing evidence of Crimson Dynasty involvement. As he spoke, Yasaka's expression grew increasingly grave. The Crimson Dynasty was supposedly eliminated, she noted, her golden eyes fixing on Issei with unspoken questions. So I believed, he acknowledged. I witnessed their destruction personally. Yet someone wields their techniques with considerable skill, Yasaka observed. Someone with knowledge of all 3 major factions' magical systems. She sipped her sake thoughtfully. This suggests either a survivor with exceptional learning capacity or someone receiving knowledge directly from the entity beyond the veil, Serafall completed. Our assessment as well, Yasaka nodded slowly. 3 days ago, an attempt was made to breach my inner sanctum. The intruder used methods unknown to my guards, a combination of vampire stealth techniques and devil illusion magic. They were repelled, but not before stealing a ceremonial dagger used in blood purification rituals. Perfect for extracting blood with specific magical properties, Issei noted grimly. Indeed, Yasaka refilled their sake cups with practiced elegance. What concerns me more is that the intruder knew precisely where the dagger was kept, in a chamber that doesn't appear in any official records of the palace. Inside information, Serafall mused. Again, knowledge provided by the entity itself. Have you encountered a vampire noblewoman recently? Issei asked. Elmenhild Karnstein. She was supposed why coming to Kyoto to investigate connections to the ritual components. Yasaka's expression revealed nothing, but her tails moved in a pattern that Issei recognized as indication of controlled anger. Lady Karnstein arrived yesterday, presenting herself as an emissary of the Vampire Council. She requested access to our historical archives regarding boundary magic, claiming it was for academic purposes related to vampire territorial protections. And you granted this access? Serafall inquired carefully. Limited access, under supervision, Yusaka confirmed. Though she seemed particularly interested in records from the sealing period. She departed only hours ago, claiming urgent business elsewhere in the city. Issei and Serafall exchanged meaningful glances. Elmenhild's focus on the sealing period was suspicious at best. Damning at worst. We should locate her immediately, Issei stated, moving to rise. Yusaka raised a hand, stopping him. My foxes are already tracking her movements. More concerning is what you haven't yet asked about. Her golden eyes held ancient knowledge and present concern. The key component of the original sealing ritual. Serafall leaned forward slightly. Which was? The tears of heaven, Yusaka replied solemnly. 7 crystallized tears shed by the Archangel Gabriel during the binding ceremony, each containing a fraction of divine power. They were separated and hidden throughout Japan as additional insurance against the seal's breaking. I was aware of their existence, Issei acknowledged. But not their specific importance to maintaining the seal. They don't merely maintain it, they are fail-safes. If the primary seal weakens, the tears activate, reinforcing the dimensional barrier. If someone is truly attempting to free the master beyond the veil, they would need to neutralize the tears first. Where are they now? Serafall asked. That is the problem, Yusaka replied grimly. 3 have been stolen in the past month from their sanctuary sites. I've moved the remaining 4 to my personal vault, but if our enemy has already located 3, they're following a systematic plan, Issei concluded. The blood collection, the ritual sites, the tears, all moving toward a single culmination point. A subtle chime interrupted them, a magical alert manifesting as a small fox spirit that materialized beside Yusaka's shoulder. It whispered in her ear briefly before disappearing in a puff of blue flame. Lady Karnstein has been located, Yusaka announced, rising gracefully to her feet. She is currently at Fushimi Inari's shrine, performing what appears to be a complex magical working. More concerning, my scouts report unusual energy readings throughout the shrine grounds, similar to the barrier disturbances we detected during the attempted intrusion. A trap, Issei stated rather than asked. Most likely, Yusaka agreed. Though whether she is the hunter or the bait remains to be seen. Either way, we need to intervene, Serafall declared. Her childish persona completely absent as she shifted to battle readiness. If she's working with our ritual enthusiasts, we need to capture and interrogate her. If she's their target, we need to prevent them from acquiring vampire noble blood for their working. Yusaka studied them both with ancient eyes that had witnessed centuries of supernatural politics. You make an unusual alliance, she observed. Vampire and devil, traditionally bitter enemies, now working in concert. Fascinating. Necessity creates strange bedfellows, Issei replied evenly. Does it indeed? Yusaka's lips curved in a subtle smile that carried layers of meaning. How very pragmatic of you, old friend. She turned, her 9 tails sweeping majestically behind her. Come, I shall accompany you to Fushimi Inari. This threatens my domain as much as the wider world. As they followed the 9-tailed fox through her palace toward the transportation circle that would take them to the shrine. Serafall moved close to Issei. Old friend, she questioned quietly, a hint of teasing in her voice. There's history there, significant history, I'd wager. Most beings who they existed for millennia accumulate significant histories with various individuals, he replied neutrally. Serafall hummed skeptically. And most ancient fox spirits don't look at various individuals quite the way she looks at you. Before Issei could respond, they reached the transportation circle, an elaborate construction of blessed wood and purified metals inlaid with gold in patterns that evoked fox spirits running in an endless circle. This will take us directly to the outer shrine, Yusaka explained, stepping into the center of the circle. Be prepared for immediate confrontation. Fushimi Inari contains thousands of torii gates, creating a natural labyrinth that amplifies magical workings. If someone is performing unauthorized rituals there, they've chosen the location for its strategic advantages. As the transportation magic activated around them, Issei found himself in the unusual position of working alongside not 1 but 2 powerful female entities from different supernatural factions. Despite the gravity of their mission, he couldn't help but acknowledge a certain irony in the situation. After centuries of deliberate isolation from supernatural politics, he now found himself at the center of a crisis that was rapidly drawing together the very factions he had so carefully avoided. The world dissolved in golden light, carrying them toward confrontat ion and complications that would test even his millennia of experience. Fushimi Inari Shrine materialized around them, its thousands of vermilion torii gates creating tunnels of sacred space that wound up the mountainside. Normally bustling with tourists and worshippers, the shrine grounds stood eerily empty, a sure sign of magical interference. Barrier spell, Yusaka identified immediately, her 9 tails spreading wide as she assessed the magical landscape. Subtle but effective, redirects human attention elsewhere without creating obvious disturbances that would alert supernatural entities. Crimson Dynasty methodology, Issei noted, recognizing the magical signature, combined with elements of modern repulsion enchantments. The same hybrid approach we've seen previously. Serafall closed her eyes briefly, extending her senses. Multiple power signatures throughout the shrine complex. At least 7 distinct magical entities, plus. Her eyes snapped open. Plus Elmenhild. She's at the inner shrine. Her magical output fluctuating erratically. Under attack, Issei questioned. Or performing a major working, Yusaka countered. The pattern suggests focused channeling rather than defensive casting. Without further discussion, they moved through the torii gate tunnels, each alert for traps or guardians. The vermilion gates intensified the magical atmosphere, the sacred purpose creating natural amplification channels for supernatural energy. As they ascended the mountain path, the magical presence grew stronger, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. They encountered the first guardian at the halfway point, another homunculus, but significantly different from those on Mount Takao. This one appeared fully human at first glance, dressed as a shrine maiden perfect features and graceful movements. Only its eyes revealed its artificial nature, solid black orbs without iris or pupil, reflecting no light. The convergence approaches, it greeted them in a melodious voice. The fox brings the vampire and devil willingly. Efficiency improved beyond initial projections. Who created you? Yusaka demanded, fox fire gathering around her fingertips. Who dares desecrate my sacred spaces with artificial abominations? The homunculus tilted its head in a disturbingly fluid motion. Creator and creation, chicken and egg, master and servant, distinctions without meaning when the veil parts. It spread its arms wide. Will you pass forcefully or join willingly? The outcome is predetermined regardless. Issei stepped forward, his hand moving to his sword hilt. Predetermined outcomes are rarely as certain as they appear. The homunculus smiled, a perfect, beautiful expression devoid of any genuine emotion. The Ancient One questions fate. Expected response within acceptable parameters. Quote, without warning, it blurred into motion, moving with speed that would have been impossible for a true human. Its attack targeted not Issei but Yusaka, fingers elongating into razor-sharp talons aimed at the fox spirit's throat. Yusaka didn't flinch. A single tail intercepted the attack, wrapping around the homunculus's extended arm with crushing force. Artificial things should know better than to challenge natural ones on consecrated ground, she stated calmly. Fox fire erupted along her tail, flowing into the homunculus like liquid flame. The artificial being convulsed as purification energy invaded its system, its perfect features contorting in mechanical spasms. Contingency activated, it gasped, its voice distorting. Pattern shifts to accommodate resistance. Its body began to glow from within, the same sickly purple light they had witnessed at Mount Takao. Issei recognized the self-destruction sequence immediately. Down, he commanded, tackling both Yusaka and Serafall to the ground as the homunculus detonated. The explosion wasn't physical but magical, a shockwave of corrupted energy that rippled outward, temporarily disrupting the natural flow of power through the shrine's torii gates. As the magical fallout dissipated, Issei rose smoothly, helping both women to their feet with automatic courtesy. They're sacrificing TGICAL disruptors, he observed, creating interference patterns in the shrine's natural energy flow. To what end? Serafall questioned, brushing herself off. It seems counterproductive if they're attempting a major ritual working. Unless the disruption itself is part of the ritual, Yusaka replied grimly. Fushimi Inari stands on a major power nexus, introducing chaos into an ordered system C, and create momentary weaknesses in dimensional boundaries. We need to reach the inner shrine, Issei stated, already moving forward. Now, they encountered 3 more homunculi as they ascended, each more sophisticated than the last. Each engaged them briefly before self-destructing in the same manner, creating cumulative disruption in the shrine's magical infrastructure. By the time they reached the approach to the inner shrine, the very air shimmered with unstable energy, reality itself seeming to ripple like the surface of a disturbed pond. The inner shrine stood at the summit, a modest, wooden structure that belied its spiritual significance. Around it, hundreds of stone fox statues stood guard, their carved eyes seeming to follow movement. Under normal circumstances, they served as vessels for minor fox spirits that maintained the shrine's sanctity. Now, they radiated wrongness, their spiritual energy corrupted by external influence. In the center of the inner shrine courtyard stood Elmenhild Karnstein, but not as they had last seen her. The vampire noblewoman's elegant attire was torn and bloodied, her perfect composure shattered. She stood within a complex magical circle, her hands raised as she desperately maintained a barrier against the 7 hooded figures that surrounded her. Blood dripped from multiple wounds on her arms and face, each drop feeding into the magical circle beneath her feet. "Help me," she cried upon seeing them, genuine terror in her golden eyes. "They're trying to." Her words cut off as one of the hooded figures made a sharp gesture, causing her to clutch her throat in silent agony. "The noble serves her purpose," intoned the central figure, turning slowly to face the newcomers. "Blood freely given or forcibly taken, the result remains the same." Like the homunculi, the speaker's voice carried that distinctive mechanical quality, but with subtle differences that suggested greater autonomy and intelligence. Its hood shadowed all features, revealing nothing of its true nature. "You dare perform unauthorized rituals in my domain." Yusaka stepped forward, her 9 tails flaring with golden fire. The very ground trembled beneath her feet as she drew upon the shrine's native power. "I am Yusaka of Kyoto, guardian of the western boundary, keeper of the sacred flame. This desecration ends now." The hooded figures remained unmoved by her display of power. Instead, the leader raised its hands, revealing pale flesh covered in the now familiar runic tattoos. "The Fox Queen arrives as calculated," it stated with the same emotionless precision. "The blood of divine approaches. The triangle nears completion." Issei's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. Elmenhild was never working with them, he realized. She was lured here deliberately, just as we were. "A noble sacrifice to draw greater prey," the hooded figure confirmed. "Blood calls to blood. Power recognizes power. The Ancient One, the Frost Queen, and the Fox Sovereign, all gathered as the design required. Serafall's power manifested as the temperature plummeted around her. "If you think we're going to stand here and let you drain our blood for your ritual, you're even more artificial than you sound. Resistance is anticipated, countermeasures prepared." The figure made a complex gesture, and the stone fox statues surrounding the shrine courtyard began to crack. Dark energy seeping from the fissures. "The master's influence grows stronger as the veil thins. Your sacred guardians now serve a new purpose." The stone foxes shattered, revealing erupted spirits within, once sacred guardian entities twisted into nightmarish parodies of their former selves. Their eyes glowed with the same purple light they had witnessed before, their spiritual essence polluted by external influence. "They've corrupted my shrine guardians," Yusaka hissed, genuine anger replacing her usual composed demeanor. "This violation cannot stand." The situation deteriorated rapidly as all 3 were forced to defend against the corrupted fox spirits while the hooded figures continued their ritual around Elmenhild. The vampire noblewoman's strength was clearly failing, her barrier flickering as more of her blood fed into the magical circle. "We need a coordinated approach," Issei called to his companions as he dispatched 2 corrupted spirits with precise sword strikes. "Yusaka, can you create a purification wave to clear the guardians?" "Yes, but it will require concentration," she replied, her tails lashing out to keep attackers at bay. "I'll need protection during the casting." "Serafall, defensive perimeter," Issei directed without hesitation. "I'll disrupt the ritual circle and extract Elmenhild." The Maou nodded sharply, ice magic already gathering between her hands. "On your mark." Issei didn't waste time with countdown. Now, they moved in perfect synchronization, as if they had fought together for centuries rather than hours. Serafall unleashed her power in a circular pattern, creating a dome of ice that surrounded Yusaka while holding back the corrupted spirits. Within this protective barrier, the nine-tailed fox began an ancient purification chant. Her tails weaving complex patterns as golden light gathered around her. Issei, meanwhile, became a blur of motion as he cut through the outer defenses of the ritual circle. Hooded figures responded with various magical attacks, blasts of corrupted energy, summoned weapons, and binding spells, but his millennia of combat experience allowed him to evade or counter each threat. 3 of the hooded figures broke formation to engage him directly, revealing inhuman speed and strength that confirmed his suspicions. These were not homunculi but something else entirely, something that blended artificial construction with organic components in ways that defied conventional magical taxonomy. He adapted his fighting style accordingly, targeting the runic tattoos visible on their exposed flesh rather than attempting vital strikes that would be ineffective against partially artificial beings. Where his blade severed the runic patterns, their power visibly diminished, their movements becoming less coordinated. At the center of the ritual, Elmenhild's barrier finally collapsed. She fell to her knees, blood flowing freely into the circle which now glowed with malevolent purpose. The lead hooded figure produced a ceremonial dagger, the same one stolen from Yusaka's palace, and approached the weakened vampire with methodical intent. Issei calculated distances and trajectories in an instant, then executed a maneuver he had perfected during the 30 Years' War, the Crimson Transposition, a technique that momentarily converted his physical form into blood mist, allowing him to pass through solid objects and magical barriers alike. He materialized directly beside Elmenhild, his sword already in motion to intercept the descending ritual dagger. The clash of Haunted metal against ancient blade created a discordant magical resonance that rippled outward, temporarily disrupting the ritual circle. Taking advantage of the momentary break in the magic, Issei Abed Elmenhild with his free arm and executed another mist form transition, removing her from the circle entirely. No, the lead figure's mechanical voice finally showed emotion, raw anger breaking through its artificial control. The sequence is disrupted. The pattern requires completion. Outside the ritual area, Yusaka's purification spell reached its crescendo. Golden light erupted from her form, expanding outward in a wave that washed over the corrupted guardian spirits. Where it touched them, the purple corruption burned away sunlight, restoring their original nature. The freed spirits immediately turned on the hooded figures, their sacred purpose reasserting itself. The leader assessed the rapidly deteriorating situation with inhuman calculation. Tactical withdrawal required. Primary objective partially achieved. Secondary extraction successful. Before anyone could stop them, all 7 hooded figures raised their hands in unison, creating a transportation circle of complex design. The air ripped open around them, revealing not a conventional portal but a tear in reality itself, a glimpse into a space between dimensions where physics seemed optional rather than mandatory. "This isn't over," the leader stated, its voice distorting as it began to step through the dimensional tier. The blood obtained is sufficient for phase completion. The master grows stronger with each barrier weakened. Your resistance merely adjusts the timeline, not the outcome. Issei moved to intercept, but Yusaka's voice stopped him. "Don't. That's not a conventional portal, it leads to a dimensional pocket connected directly to the veil. Following them without preparation would be suicide." Reluctantly, he held his position as the hooded figures disappeared into the tear, which aled itself with a sound like reality sighing in relief. The oppressive magical atmosphere began to dissipate, the shrine's natural energies gradually reasserting themselves. Serafall lowered her ice barriers as the immediate threat passed. "They got what they wanted," she observed grimly. "Enough of Elmenhild's blood to continue their ritual work." "Not all they wanted," Issei corrected, turning his attention to the weakened vampire noblewoman he had rescued. "They failed to obtain blood from any of us 3 original sealers." Elmenhild lay pale and trembling in his arms, her aristocratic composure completely shattered. "I didn't know," she whispered, golden eyes wide with shock and residual fear. "I swear by my house, I didn't know. The council sent me with genuine purpose. I was in investigating the Kyoto connection when they approached me, offered information about the disappearances, and led you directly into their trap, Yusaka concluded, approaching with regal grace desp. I.e. the magical exertion she had just performed. They used you as bait to draw us here. A strategy that partially succeeded, Serafall noted. We came as expected, though they failed to capture us. This round, Issei added soberly. They'll adapt their approach for the next encounter. Yusaka knelt beside Elmenhild, examining her with experienced eyes. The blood extraction was systematic and precise. They took exactly what they needed, no more, no less. She'll recover with proper rest and feeding. I can provide both at my Kyoto residence, Issei offered, carefully lifting the weakened vampire. Unless you object to a vampire noble recuperating in your territory, Lady Yusaka. The nine-tailed fox's lips curved in a subtle smile. Your Kyoto residence. How interesting that you maintain property in my domain without my knowledge. Not without your knowledge, he corrected mildly. Without your objection. The deed is registered under Takamagahara Holdings, the same corporatio. And that makes annual donations to your Shrine Restoration Fund. Yusaka's golden eyes widened fractionally before she laughed, a musical sound that momentarily lightened the tension. After all these centuries, you still manage to surprise me, old friend. She gestured gracefully. By all means, tend to your wounded kinswoman in your apparently long-established Kyoto home. Serafall watched this exchange with evident interest, her eyes moving between Issei and Yusaka with newfound curiosity. I should contact the underworld, she said. Update them on what we've learned and warn them about potential targeting of devil blood. You're both welcome to use my transportation circle to reach your destinations, Yusaka offered. I must remain to complete the purification of my shrine and strang. Then its defenses against further intrusion. As they prepared to depart, Yusaka approached Issei, speaking quietly enough that only he could hear. The path you walk now is dangerous in ways beyond the obvious, Crimson Shadow. Two powerful women, two different worlds. History suggests you've never managed such complications well. Issei met her golden gaze evenly. The current crisis takes precedence over personal considerations. Does it? Her nine tails swayed gently behind her. Or does it merely provide convenient justification for avoiding those considerations entirely? She glanced meaningfully toward Serafall, who was creating a communication circle a short distance away. She is not what I expected from a devil of her station. There is depth beneath her affected frivolity. A observation I've made myself. Issei acknowledged. Yusaka smiled knowingly. We will speak again soon, old friend. The shrine at moonrise, 3 days hence. There are matters regarding the tiers of heaven that require discussion. She leaned closer, her voice dropping further. And perhaps matters of the heart as well, if you can bear to acknowledge their existence after all this time. Before he could respond, she turned with elegant grace, moving away to begin the shrine's purification. Issei found Serafall watching him, her expression unreadable. Ready to depart, she asked as he approached with the unconscious Elmenhild. Yes, my Kyoto residence isn't far, but transportation would be preferable given our wounded companion. Serafall nodded, completing the circle with a flourish of magical energy. Interesting dynamics with the Fox Queen, she commented casually as the transportation magic began to gather. Very interesting indeed. Issei met her gaze directly. History is rarely simple when measured in centuries rather than years. Oh, I'm counting on that, she replied with a smile that was neither her public persona's exaggerated cheer nor completely serious, something genuine that fell between the two. It makes everything so much more fascinating. As the transportation circle activated, carrying them toward his long-established Kyoto sanctuary, Issei found himself in the unfamiliar position of being unable to predict how events would unfold, not merely the crisis with the master beyond the veil, but the unexpected personal dynamics developing between him. Self and two powerful women from different supernatural factions. After 2 millennia of existence, unpredictability was a rarity he had almost forgotten could exist. Whether that represented danger or opportunity remained to be seen. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Nine Tales of Fate. Morning light filtered through ancient wisteria vines that draped across the courtyard of Issei's Kyoto residence, ca. Sting dappled shadows on weathered stone. Unlike his Tokyo safe house with its blend of traditional architecture and modern technology, this sanctuary embraced its historical roots without compromise. Constructed during the Kamakura period, the compound featured meditation gardens, a koi pond fed by a natural spring, and living quarters designed according to principles of feng shui that predated the term itself. Issei knelt beside the futon where Elmenhild rested, her aristocratic features unnaturally pale even for a vampire. The ritual blood extraction had taken more than mere vitae, it had reigned significant magical essence as well. Though vampires possessed remarkable regenerative capabilities, this type of targeted mystical depletion required specialized treatment. "How is she?" Serafall asked, entering the room with uncharacteristic quietness. She had abandoned her magical girl outfit completely, now dressed in a simple blue yukata provided by the house staff, ancient yokai who had served Issei for generations. "Stabilized," he replied, carefully checking the enchanted bandages wrapped around Elmenhild's arms. The cloth was inscribed with healing runes that glowed faintly. They worked to accelerate her recovery. The blood loss is secondary to the magical depletion. Thick metaphysical components along with the physical vitae. Serafall knelt on the opposite side of the futon, her expression thoughtful as she observed the healing process. Crimson Dynasty blood magic with modifications for selective extraction. They're becoming more sophisticated with each attempt. Indeed, Issei rose in a single fluid motion. She'll need at least 12 hours of uninterrupted rest before she regains consciousness. I've administered a specialized restorative that should accelerate the process. They moved to the adjoining room, a traditional tea space overlooking the inner garden. An elderly tanuki in human form, distinguishable only by the faint rings around his eyes and slight bushiness to his graying eyebrows, served tea with practiced precision before bowing deeply and withdrawing. "Your staff is remarkably well trained," Serafall observed, accepting the porcelain cup with appropriate formality. "Most yokai I've encountered wouldn't serve a devil without at least some hesitation. Takeda-san's family has maintained this property for 17 generations, Issei explained. Their loyalty transcends traditional factional boundaries. Much like your own associations, it seems," she noted with a hint of amusement, gesturing to encompass both the traditional Japanese setting in her own presence. A vampire king with a yokai-staffed Kyoto residence and a devil houseguest. Quite the cosmopolitan existence for someone reputed to be a recluse. Issei allowed himself the faintest smile. Reputations serve their purpose. Reality need not conform to them. "A philosophy I appreciate," Serafall replied, her typical exuberance momentarily set aside for genuine thoughtfulness. "Few understand the value of cultivated misperception better than I do." They sipped tea in comfortable silence, each contemplating the rapidly evolving situation. The morning light strengthened, birds calling to one another in the garden beyond. For a moment, the supernatural crisis that had brought them together seemed distant, held at bay by the tranquil sanctuary. The moment was broken by a discreet chime, Serafall's communication device alerting her to an incoming message. She glanced at the magical circle that appeared above her palm, her expression growing serious as she read the floating text. "Confirmation from Underworld Intelligence," she stated, dismissing the circle with a gesture. "3 devil disappearances in Europe match the pattern we've been tracking. All minor nobility, all with bloodlines dating back to the original Devil-Angel War. Historical significance rather than current power," Issei noted. "They're selecting targets with specific lineages connected to the original sealing." "Precisely. And there's more. A suspected attempt against Gabriel was thwarted in Vatican City 3 days ago. The attackers used methods consistent with what we've encountered." Issei's expression remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed slightly, the equivalent of significant alarm for the usually controlled vampire. "Gabriel is the last of the angelic sealers. If they're targeting her directly, they're accelerating their timeline. Which means we need to consolidate what we know and identify their next move," Serafall concluded, setting down her teacup with newfound urgency. The ritual pattern, the blood extraction methodology, the focus on original sealers, it all points to a systematic approach to breaking the dimensional barrier. Issei rose, moving to a seemingly ordinary section of the bamboo wall. He pressed his palm against a specific panel, infusing it with a trace of his power. The wall responded, bamboo sections sliding sill, endly to reveal a hidden alcove containing an ancient scroll case made of polished bone, twin to the one he had used for transportation. This contains records from the original sealing, he explained, carefully removing the scroll. One of 7 copies created for the original participants. Most have been lost or destroyed over the centuries. He unrolled the scroll on the low table between them, revealing text written in multiple languages, some human, others decidedly not. Intricate diagrams illustrated dimensional constructs and binding geometries beyond conventional magical understanding. The Master Beyond the Veil. Serafall read, her finger hovering above but not touching the fragile parchment. Its true name is absent. Deliberately so, Issei confirmed. Names have power, particularly for extra-dimensional entities. The original sealers used descriptive titles rather than risk invoking its actual designation. They studied the scroll together, their heads inclined toward each other as they deciphered the ancient text. Despite the gravity of their task, Issei found himself unusually aware of Serafall's proximity, the faint scent of winter pine that emanated from her graceful efficiency of her movements as she traced complex magical formulas, the occasional soft sound of consideration she made when encountering particularly difficult passages. The sealing Riku. I read 7 participants because of the entity's multi-dimensional nature, Serafall noted, pointing to a specific diagram. It exists simultaneously in 7 parallel reality states. Each sealer Ancho read the binding to a different dimensional layer. And the tiers of heaven that Yusaka mentioned, Issei added, indicating another section, were created as failsafe mechanisms. If the primary seals weakened, the tiers would activate, drawing on the original binding energy to reinforce the dimensional barriers. Which explains why they're targeting them now, Serafall concluded. They need to neutralize the fail-safes before attempting the final breaking ritual. A soft knock at the doorway interrupted them. Takeda-san entered with a formal bow. Forgive the intrusion, Hyodo-sama, the elderly Tanuki said, his voice gravelly with age. Lady Yusaka's messenger awaits in the outer garden. She requests your presence at the Inari shrine at your earliest convenience. The matter is described as urgent. Issei nodded once. Please inform the messenger we will attend within the hour. After Takeda-san withdrew, Serafall raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I was included in this invitation. The situation transcends traditional boundaries, Issei replied simply. Your insight would be valuable, and Yusaka is pragmatic enough to recognize this despite historical tensions between yokai and devils. How diplomatic, Serafall observed with a hint of amusement. And entirely practical, though I suspect Lady Yusaka might have preferred a private audience with her old friend. The subtle emphasis on the final words carried unmistakable curiosity. Issei met her gaze directly, neither confirming nor deflecting the implied question about his relationship with the nine-tailed fox leader. History is complex, he stated simply, as is the present situation. Serafall's lips curved in a smile that was neither her public persona's exaggerated cheer nor completely Seryu's, the genuine expression he was beginning to recognize as her true self. Complexity is rarely boring, she replied. And I've found immortality requires regular doses of interest to remain tolerable. The Fushimi Inari shrine had undergone a remarkable transformation since their battle the previous day. Where corrupted energy had polluted the sacred grounds, purification magic now saturated every surface. The vermilion torii gates glowed with renewed spiritual power, and fox spirits, now properly sanctified, patrolled the perimeter with vigilant attention. Yusaka awaited them at the inner shrine, no longer dressed in her formal shrine maiden attire but in battle garments that spoke of readiness for conflict. A ceremonial naginata rested across her knees as she knelt before the central altar. Its blade inscribed with characters that shifted and changed as if alive. Her 9 tails fanned behind her, each tip glowing with concentrated spiritual energy. You brought the devil, she observed without turning as they approached. Ving detected their presence immediately. Pragmatic, if unconventional. The threat we face doesn't recognize factional boundaries, Issei replied. Neither should our response. Yusaka rose in a single fluid motion, her golden eyes assessing them both with ancient wisdom. Indeed, she inclined her head slightly toward Serafall. Your assistance yesterday was appreciated, Leviathan. Few devils would expend power to protect a yokai shrine. Few devils have my appreciation for historical architecture and dimensional stability, Serafall replied. With a formal bow that perfectly balanced respect with the dignity of her station. The shrine's destruction would have been both aesthetically tragic and strategically disadvantageous. A faint smile touched Yusaka's lips. Practical and diplomatic. I begin to understand your unusual alliance. She turned, gesturing for them to follow. Come, what I must show you lies beneath the shrine. She led them to an inconspicuous stone lantern positioned between two guardian fox statues. With a precise application of her power, the lantern glowed briefly before the ground beside it rippled like water, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. The underpath, Yusaka explained as they descended. A network of tunnels and chambers beneath Kyoto that predates human settlement. The yokai Have maintained these passages since the time of the kami. The staircase ended in a vast chamber carved from living rock, illuminated by foxfire lanterns that cast blue-gold light across ancient stone. The walls were covered in murals depicting yokai history, battles, ceremonies, and significant events spanning thousands of years. At the chamber's center stood a circular platform surrounded by 9 stone pillars, each carved to resemble a fox in different poses. The council chamber of 9 tails, Yusaka stated, stepping onto the platform, where the leaders of the yokai factions gather in times of crisis. As if summoned by her words, shadowy figures materialized around the chamber's perimeter, yokai of various types and ranks, some maintaining humanoid appearances while others displayed their true forms without disguise. They observed the newcomers with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. You bring outsiders to the sacred chamber, challenged a Tengu elder, his black wings rustling with agitation. A vampire and a devil, no less. The old accords forbid this. The old accords also speak of cooperation in times of existential threat, Yusaka countered calmly. The master beyond the veil threatens all realms, not merely our own. Murmurs rippled through the assembled yokai at the mention of the ancient entity. Fear and recognition showed on many faces, particularly the older spirits. 3 of the 7 tiers have been stolen, Yusaka continued, addressing the gathering. The most recent from our own territory, despite our protections. The dimensional barrier weakens with each loss. How do we know these outsiders aren't responsible? Demanded a water spirit, her form shifting constantly like flowing liquid. The vampire has ancient knowledge, and devils have always sought power beyond their domain. Issei stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. I was among the original sealers, he stated, his quiet voice carrying throughout the chamber. My blood helped create the barriers that have protected all realms for a millennium. I have no interest in unleashing what we sacrificed so much to contain. The yokai council fell silent, many exchanging surprised glances. Few had known of Issei's involvement in the ancient sealing ritual. The vampire speaks truth, came a new voice, ancient and rasping. The yokai RTED is a diminutive figure hobbled forward, leaning heavily on a gnarled staff. Despite her appearance as an elderly human woman, her aura radiated power that rivaled Yusaka's own. I remember him from that time, though he used a different name then. Elder Hisako, Yusaka acknowledged with respect. Your presence honors us. The ancient yokai, a kitsune so old she had transcended ordinary classifications, approached Issei with slow, deliberate steps. Crimson Shadow, she addressed him, using his old title. Still walking the night after all these centuries. Still carrying the burden of that day. Issei inclined his head in respectful recognition. Elder Hisako, your memory remains as sharp as ever. She cackled, the sound echoing strangely in the chamber. When you've lived as long as I have, memories are all that truly remain. Her gaze shifted to Serafall, ancient eyes narrowing. And a Leviathan, no less. The wheels of fate turn in interesting patterns indeed. Yusaka reclaimed the council's attention with a subtle flare of her power. The remaining 4 tiers are secured in our deepest vault, but our enemy grows bolder and more resourceful with each success. Yesterday's attack on Fushimi Inari was a direct challenge to our sovereignty, one we cannot allow to go unanswered. What would you have us do, Lady Yusaka? Asked a Nekomata representative, her feline ears twitching with nervous energy. Our combat forces are stretched thin, maintaining the barrier between the human world and yokai territory. And that is precisely what our enemy counts on, Yusaka replied. They strike where our attention is divided, using our own responsibilities against us. The attack patterns suggest knowledge of yokai security protocols, Issei observed. Someone familiar with your defenses is either compromised or directly involved. A tense silence fell over the chamber as the implications of his statement registered. Yokai glanced at one another with newfound suspicion. Centuries-old factional rivalries suddenly reignited by the suggestion of a traitor. You accuse one of our own. The Tengu elder demanded, feathers bristling. I state a tactical assessment based on observable evidence. Issei corrected calmly. The precision of the attacks, the knowledge of guard rotations, the ability to bypass specific wards, all indicate inside information. Before the situation could deteriorate further, Serafall stepped forward. Perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than accusations, she suggested, her diplomatic skills evident in her measured tone. With Lady Yasaka's permission, I could establish a truth-seeking field over the security records. It would reveal magical tampering without requiring accusations against specific individuals. The council members exchanged uncertain glances. A devil offering magical assistance in yokai territory was unprecedented. A reasonable suggestion, Yasaka stated after brief consideration. Elder Hisako, W. Old you oversee this working to ensure its parameters remain as stated. The ancient kitsune nodded, her eyes never leaving Serafall. I would be most interested to observe devil magic applied to yokai concerns. Proceed, Leviathan. With the council's reluctant approval, Serafall began a complex magical working. Ice crystals formed between her fingers, each catching the foxfire light and refract. Ting it into patterns that corresponded to specific magical frequencies. As she worked, Issei noticed the precision and efficiency of her movements, evidence of centuries of magical refinement that belied her often frivolous public persona. Fascinating technique, Elder Hisako commented, watching closely. Underworld methodologies have evolved significantly since last I observed them. The crystal line matrices serve as both filtering mechanisms and amplification nodes. An adaptation of traditional devil scrying, Serafall explained as she completed the working. Modified to specify, see magical signatures rather than individuals. The ice crystals merged into a single complex lattice that hovered above the center of the chamber. Within its structure, images began to form, security. Records from various yokai installations, focusing particularly on those guarding the stolen tears. There, Issei identified, pointing to a subtle distortion in one of the images. That guard pause of tampering. The magical signature is unusual. Yasaka stepped closer, her golden eyes narrowing as she examined the distortion. Nekomata energy, but altered somehow. Corrupted. The Nekomata representative hissed, her tail bristling. Impossible. My people are loyal to the council. Not corruption in the sense of betrayal, Issei clarified. More like external influence imposing itself on the natural energy pattern. Similar to what we witnessed with the Shrine Guardians, but more subtle. The Master's influence, Elder Hisako concluded grimly. Reaching through weakened points in the dimensional barrier to affect those sensitive to spiritual energies. Serafall manipulated the crystal lattice, focusing on the identified distortion. The pattern is consistent across multiple security points. Always Nekomata energy. Always subtly distorted in the same manner. A specific bloodline vulnerability, Yasaka reasoned. Not treachery but exploitation. The Nekomata representative's expression shifted from defensive to concerned. The impure clan, she whispered, earning shocked looks from other council members. Those born with special sensitivity to dimensional energies. Why were ostracized generations ago for their unpredictable powers. And would therefore be particularly susceptible to extra-dimensional influence, Issei concluded. As well as potentially harboring resentment against mainstream yokai society. The impure clan was believed extinct, the Tengu elder stated. Their bloodline died out decades ago. Officially, perhaps, Yasaka replied, her expression troubled. But rumors have persisted of survivors living on the fringes of yokai society. If they are being manipulated by the master beyond the veil, Elder Hisako warned, they represent both victims and significant threats. Their natural abilities amplified by external power would make them formidable indeed. A commotion at the chamber entrance interrupted their discussion. 2 fox spirit guards entered, escorting a struggling figure between them. Despite their firm grip, the newcomer moved with a fluid grace that spoke of exceptional physical training. Forgive the interruption, Lady Yasaka. One guard announced formally. This intruder was captured attempting to access the lower vaults. She claims to have information about the stolen tears. The captive, a young woman with distinctive black hair and feline features, ceased struggling as she took in the assembled council. Her golden eyes, slitted like a cat's, widened slightly at the sight of Issei and Serafall before narrowing in calculation. Well, she purred, her voice carrying both amusement and wariness. When I came looking for the Fox Queen, I didn't expect to find a vampire king and a Satan-class devil as well. How convenient. Kuroka, the Nekomata representative hissed, recognition and hostility evident in her tone. Traitor and kinslayer. Such harsh words from those who abandoned my clan to suffering, Kuroka replied. Her casual tone belying the tension in her posture. But I'm not here to reopen old wounds. I have information about your missing trinkets and the ones who took them. Yusaka raised a hand, silencing the outraged murmurs that erupted from the council. Speak then, Kuroka of the Impure clan. But know that your words will be judged against existing evidence. The neck. Omada's eyes gleamed with dangerous intelligence. Fair enough. First, a gesture of good faith. She reached slowly into her kimono, movements deliberate to avoid provoking her guards. From within, withdrew a small crystalline object that glowed within her light. One of your precious tears, recovered at considerable personal risk. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Yusaka stepped forward, her power flaring as she examined the object without touching it. Authentic, she confirmed after careful inspection. The fourth tear, stolen from the Eastern Shrine 3 days ago. You're welcome, Kuroka smirked. Now, about those who took it, they're not what you think. Not entirely, anyway. Explain, Issei prompted, studying the Nekomata with analytical intensity. Kuroka met his gaze directly, showing either exceptional courage or recklessness. They call themselves the Convergence. Part cult, part research collective, all devoted to their precious master. They've been recruiting insight of types, those with natural connections to dimensional energies, and enhancing them. Her expression darkened. My younger sister nearly fell into their clutches. That's why I've been tracking them. These enhancements, Serafall inquired, what form do they take? Magical modifications, primarily, Kuroka explained, shifting her weight to a more comfortable position despite her captor's grip. They use blood rituals to infuse their followers with dimensional energy, creates a connection to their master that allows for upgrades. Her lips curled in disgust. Turns people into something not quite human, not quite homunculus. They call the process ascension. The hooded figures at Fushimi Inari, Issei noted. Not fully artificial constructs but modified humans. Bingo, Kuroka confirmed. Former humans, former yokai, former devils, all transformed into the master's perfect servants through progressive blood rituals. The more powerful the original being, the more valuable the final product. And how do you know all this? Yusaka questioned, suspicion evident in her tone. Kuroka's expression hardened. Because they tried to recruit me. Twice. The first time with promises of power and belonging. The second time with my sister as leverage. A dangerous smile curved her lips. They learned quickly that threatening what's mine has terminal consequences. Yet you didn't come forward with this information earlier, the Tengu elder accused. Why now? Self-preservation, Kuroka replied bluntly. I've been a fugitive from multiple factions for years. Approaching any official power structure meant risking execution or imprisonment. Her golden eyes fixed on Issei. But when I learned the Ancient One was involved, the calculation changed. His reputation suggests he might actually care about stopping the convergence rather than just maintaining political stability. Issei regarded her thoughtfully. The Nekomata was clearly dangerous, her power carefully controlled but substantial, yet her information aligned with what they had already discovered. More importantly, her possession of one of the stolen tears lent credibility to her claims. The tears, he said. What does the Convergence want with them? They're not trying to destroy them as you might think, Kuroka explained. They're converting them. The rituals they've developed allow them to invert the tears' original purpose. Instead of strengthening the dimensional barriers, they become breaching tools that weaken specific points. Serafall stepped closer, her expression serious. Converting divine artifacts of that caliber would require extraordinary magical knowledge and power. Which they have, Thanks to their master's influence, Kuroka confirmed. The leader of the convergence. They call him the Voice, channels knowledge directly from beyond the veil. Ancient magic, forgotten techniques, forbidden rituals, all flowing into his mind like a divine download. This voice, Yasaka pressed. You've seen him. Kuroka shook her head. Never directly. He operates through proxies, the ascended ones you encountered at the shrine. But I've traced their activities to a central compound in the mountains north of Kyoto. Heavily warded, magically concealed, and guarded by modified humans and constructs. The council erupted in angry discussion, yokai factions arguing over appropria. Responses and accusations of security failures. Yasaka silenced them with a sharp pulse of her power. Verification first, she stated firmly. We will not commit forces based solely on the word of a known criminal. Regardless of the evidence presented. I can lead a small reconnaissance team, Kuroka offered. Enough to confirm without triggering their defenses. After that, it's your problem. Issei exchanged a glance with Serafall, silent communication passing between them after just days of acquaintance. She nodded slightly, indicating agreement with his unspoken assessment. I will accompany Kuroka, he announced. My abilities are well suited to covert observation. As will I, Serafall added. Devil magic includes certain cloaking techniques that may prove useful against their detection methods. Yasaka considered briefly before nodding. Agreed. A small team presents less risk of detection. However, she turned to Kuroka with narrowed eyes, you will be bound by a truth-seeking spell for the duration of this mission. Any deception or betrayal will be immediately apparent. The Nekomata shrugged with forced casualness. Fine by me, not like I have much choice anyway. Then it is decided, Yasaka declared. The reconnaissance will proceed immediately. The council will prepare defensive measures for the remaining tiers in our possession. As the yokai Su, NCIL dispersed to their respective duties, Yasaka approached the unlikely trio with measured steps. My personal chambers, she instructed quietly. We have matters to discuss before you depart. Yasaka's private sanctuary within the underground complex reflected her dual nature as both spiritual leader and powerful yokai. Traditional Shinto elements, purification fonts, sacred texts, ceremon, IAL implements, coexisted with more primal yokai artifacts. 9 ceremonial masks adorned one wall, each representing a different aspect of fox spirit magic. A central fire pit burned with golden flames that required no fuel, casting warm light throughout the space. The truth binding, she stated, gesturing for Kuroka to kneel before the sacred fire. It will not restrict your actions or thoughts, merely reveal any intentional deception. The Nekomata complied with surprising docility, though her eyes remained alert and calculating. Just get it over with. Time isn't exactly on our side here. Yasaka performed the binding ritual with elegant efficiency, golden energy flowing from her hands to encircle Kuroka's throat in a pattern resembling a delicate collar. The Nekomata grimaced as the magic settled into place, but offered no resistance. It is done, Yasaka announced. The binding will dissolve once your mission is complete or if your life is in imminent danger. Kuroka rose, testing the magical construct with cautious fingers. Fancy work, she acknowledged reluctantly. Now, about that mountain compound. In a moment, Yasaka interrupted. She turned to a concealed cabinet, opening it to reveal a lacquered box adorned with protective seals. First, we must address the matter of the recovered tear. She opened the box carefully, creating a cushioned space within. Place it here, she instructed Kuroka. It will be secured with the others while you conduct your reconnaissance. The Nekomata hesitated fractionally before withdrawing the crystalline tear from her kimono. As she moved to place it in the box, Issei noticed something, a subtle fluctuation in the tear's magical signature that shouldn't have been present in a pure divine artifact. Wait, he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that stopped Kuroka mid-motion. That tear has been tampered with. Kuroka froze, genuine surprise flashing across her features. What? No, I took it directly from their ritual chamber. They hadn't started the conversion process yet. Yasaka's expression darkened as she extended her senses toward the crystal. He's right. There's a foreign energy signature EMB. Edited within the structure, subtle but present. A tracking spell, Serafall identified, stepping closer to examine the artifact. Sophisticated work, nearly undetectable beneath the chair's own powerful aura. The truth binding around Kuroka's throat remained dormant, indicating she had not knowingly deceived them. "Those bastards," she hissed, genuine anger flashing in her eyes. "They must have tagged it as a contingency. Or this was their plan all along," Issei suggested. "Allow the chair to be stolen by someone likely to return it to Yusaka's protection, thereby infiltrating the very heart of yokai security." "A Trojan horse," Serafall agreed. Elegant in its simplicity, Yusaka's 9 tails fanned out behind her, agitation evident in their movement. "Can the tracking component be neutralized without damaging the chair itself?" Serafall studied the crystal thoughtfully. "Difficult but possible. The foreign energy is intertwined with the chair's natural resonance in a way that suggests deliberate integration rather than simple attachment." "I can assist," Issei offered. "Blood magic includes techniques for separating conjoined energy patterns." "As does senjutsu," Kuroka added unexpectedly. When the others looked at her with surprise, she shrugged. "What? The impure clan specializes in energy manipulation. It's literally what got us labeled impure in the first place." Yusaka considered briefly before nodding. "A combined approach then, each applying their expertise to a different aspect of the separation." They gathered around a low stone table where Yusaka placed the compromised tier. Each positioned according to their specialty. Issei to the north, representing blood magic's association with life force. Serafall to the east, where ice magic's precision would be most effective. Kuroka to the south, where senjutsu's natural energy manipulation held strongest influence, and Yusaka to the west, her purification abilities creating the foundation for the working. "On my mark," Yusaka instructed, her 9 tails beginning a rhythmic pattern behind her. 3, 2, 1. They activated their respective magics simultaneously, creating a perfect confluence of different energies. Issei's blood magic manifested as crimson threads that identified and isolated the foreign energies' anchor points. Serafall's ice magic formed crystalline barriers that prevented the tracking spell from adapting or escaping. Kuroka's senjutsu created a field that separated the natural from the artificial, while Yusaka's purification power systematically cleansed each component as it was isolated. The process required perfect coordination and extraordinary concentration. As they worked, Issei became increasingly aware of the unique magical signatures of his companions, Serafall's precise, mathematically perfect constructs, Kuroka's intuitive, almost wild manipulation of natural energies, Yusaka's ancient, refined purification techniques. 3 powerful women from different supernatural factions, each extraordinary in her own way, working in harmony under his coordination. After 20 minutes of intense magical exertion, the tracking spell finally separated. From the tear, a sickly purple energy that writhed like a living thing as it was contained within Serafall's ice prison. "Fascinating," Serafall murmured, examining the captured spell. "This isn't conventional magic. The energy signature contains elements I've never encountered before." "Dimensional bleed through," Kuroka identified, her expertise in such matters evident. "Energy from beyond the veil, incorporated into standard magical structures. That's how they've been bypassing traditional wards and detection methods." Yusaka carefully examined the now purified tear, her expression relaxing as she confirmed its integrity. The tear itself is undamaged. Its original purpose remains intact. She placed it in the protective box, sealing it with multiple layers of protective magic. "It will be secured with the others immediately." "And what about that?" Kuroka gestured to the imprisoned tracking spell, which continued to pulse with unsettling vitality. "An opportunity," Issei stated, studying the energy with analytical intensity. "This contains a direct connection to whoever placed it. With proper manipulation, it could be traced back to its source." "Risky," Serafall cautioned. "Establishing connection with unknown dimensional energy could allow influence to flow both necessary," Issei countered. "This may provide confirmation of the compound's location without requiring physical reconnaissance." Yusaka nodded in agreement. "Proceed, but with caution. The chamber's protective wards will contain any unexpected consequences." Issei approached the imprisoned spell, Nding his senses toward it with millennia of magical experience guiding his actions. Ancient vampires possessed unique abilities to perceive and interact with magical energies, a product of their inner Ently liminal nature as beings caught between life and death. Interesting, he murmured as he studied the energy pattern. The spell contains a recursive loop. Any attempt to trace it would normally trigger an alert to its creator. Can you bypass it? Serafall asked, moving to stand beside him. With assistance, he replied, glancing at Kuroka. Your senjutsu could create a buffer between the trace attempt and the alert trigger. The Nekomata raised an eyebrow but stepped forward without hesitation. Worth a try. Just tell me what you need. Create a natural energy field around the containment. Senjutsu exists outside conventional magical taxonomies, which should allow us to interact with the spell without activating its security measures. Kuroka nodded, closing her eyes in concentration. Blue-green energy began to flow from her hands, surrounding Serafall's ice prison in a shimmering field that resembled heat distortion in summer air. Ready when you are, Vampire King. Issei placed his hand against the combined barrier, extending his consciousness along the magical connection embedded within the tracking spell. The sensation was disorienting, like plunging into a river that flowed in multiple directions simultaneously. Dimensional energy operated according to principles that defied conventional magical understanding, requiring intuitive navigation rather than structured methodology. Images began to form in his mind, fragmented glimpses transmitted through the magical connection. A mountain compound built into the living rock, its architecture blending human construction with something distinctly alien. Hooded figures moving with mechanical precision through corridors illuminated by sickly purple light. Ritual chambers where modified humans underwent ascension procedures, their bodies transforming as dimensional energy rewrote their physical structure. At the compound's heart, a central chamber contained a sight that confirmed their worst fears, a tear in reality itself. A vertical rent in the fabric of space-time that pulsed with malevolent purpose. Through this dimensional wound, something was reaching, not a physical appendage but a tendril of pure influence that connected to a hooded figure seated on a crystalline throne. The voice of the master. Before Issei could observe more, the connection suddenly reversed, as if whatever lay on the oath side had detected his presence and reached back through the link. Dark energy surged along the magical pathway, threatening to overwhelm his mental defenses. Sever the connection, Serafall commanded, recognizing the danger instantly. Her ice magic intensified, crystallizing around the tracking spell to isolate it completely. Yusaka moved with extraordinary speed, her 9 tails creating a barrier of purification energy between Issei and the corrupted magic. Kuroka hissed in alarm, her senjutsu field wavering under the assault before she stabilized it with visible effort. Something's coming through, she warned, golden eyes wide with genuine fear. Something big. The tracking spell pulsed once, twice, then exploded with concentrated force, shattering Serafall's ice prison despite its remarkable strength. Dark energy erupted outward, forming a humanoid shape that hovered above the stone table. Though transparent and clearly a projection rather than physical manifestation, its presence radiated malevolence that made the very air feel contaminated. Seekers, it spoke, its voice containing the same mechanical quality they had encountered in the Ascended Ones, but layered with something older and infinitely more alien. The Master sees your interference. The Master knows your names. The Master remembers the betrayal of the ceiling. Containment protocol, Yusaka ordered, her voice cutting through the shock that had momentarily frozen the others. Golden fire erupted from her hands, forming a cage around the manifestation. Serafall responded instantly, ice magic rain, forcing the containment from another angle. Kuroka, after a moment's hesitation, added her own senjutsu barriers, creating a triple-layered prison around the projection. Issei stepped forward, his Imson eyes fixed on the manifestation with ancient recognition. You have no power here, fragment. Return to your master with this message. What was sealed shall remain sealed. What was broken shall not be mended. What was banished shall not return. The projection seemed to writhe within its magical prison, its form becoming less humanoid and more abstract, angles and geometries that hurt the eye to observe directly. The seals weaken. The tears convert. The blood awakens memory. 7 become 3, 3 become 1, 1 becomes none. The veil parts. Who is the voice? Serafall demanded, typically cheerful demeanor completely absent. Who leads the convergence in the physical realm? A sound emerged from the projection. Not laughter as humans would understand it, but something that conveyed cruel amusement nonetheless. The voice is chosen, not born. The voice hears what others cannot. The voice speaks what others will not. The voice has worn many faces across many times. A possessed vessel, Yusaka realized aloud. A physical anchor for the master's influence. Correct. Fox Queen, the projection confirmed, its form continuing to shift in disturbing patterns. The current voice was once known to you all. A seeker of knowledge who found more than was sought. A player of games who became a piece instead. Before they could press for more specific information, the Anif station began to destabilize, its form dissolving into particles of dark energy that strained against the magical containment. The invitation stands, it declared as it faded. Join or be converted. Serve or be consumed. The awakening approaches regardless of your choice. With a final pulse of malevolent energy, the projection collapsed entirely, leaving nothing but a scorched mark on the stone table where it had appeared. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as they processed what had just occurred. Kuroka was the first to speak, her usual nonchalance notably absent. "Well," she said, voice slightly unsteady, "I think we can confirm the compound exists. And that they know we're coming. More importantly," Serafall added grimly, "we've confirmed direct communication between the physical world and whatever exists beyond the veil. The dimensional barrier is weaker than we estimated." Yusaka moved to a nearby basin, washing her hands in purified water as if to cleanse herself of the corrupted energy's touch. The projection mentioned the current voice was known to us all. A concerning implication. Someone with connections to multiple supernatural factions, Issei reasoned. Someone with access to restricted knowledge and the ambition to seek more. That narrows it down to, several hundred possibilities, Kuroka remarked dryly, though her tail lashed behind her in clear agitation. Plenty of power-hungry intellectuals scattered throughout the supernatural world. We need to proceed with the reconnaissance as planned, Issei stated, his millennia of XP. Rience allowing him to maintain focus despite the unsettling encounter. But with additional precautions. The element of surprise is lost, but they may not know exactly when or how we intend to approach. Agreed, Serafall nodded. Though I suggest we bring additional resources. My queen pieces can be mobilized without alerting the broader devil community. And I know some independent contractors who owe me favors, Kuroka added. Formalize in infiltration and intelligence gathering. Yusaka studied them each in turn, her ancient eyes assessing their resolve. Very well. The reconnaissance will proceed tomorrow at nightfall. Until then, I suggest you prepare thoroughly. The convergence clearly possesses capabilities beyond our initial assessment. As they finalized their plans, Issei noticed a subtle shift in the dynamics between his companions. Yusaka maintained her composed authority, but her golden gaze lingered on him more frequently than strictly necessary for planning purposes. Serafall, despite her focus on tactical details, positioned herself closer to him than before, occasionally brushing against him in ways that seemed simultaneously casual and deliberate. And Kuroka, the newest addition to their unlikely alliance, watched these interactions with the calculating assessment of a predator identifying territorial claims. The mission had become more complex, not merely in its strategic dimensions but in its personal ones as well. 3 powerful women, each extraordinary in her own way, now orbited his existence with varying degrees of interest. After centuries of deliberate isolation, the sudden complexity of these relationships represented unfamiliar territory even for one as ancient as himself. Nightfall brought a different atmosphere to Kyoto's supernatural district. While humans saw only traditional architecture and cultural landmarks, those with spiritual awareness perceived the thriving yokai community that existed alongside the human world. Paper lanterns carrying foxfire illuminated streets where tanuki merchants haggled with tengu traders, nekomata entertainers performed for mixed crowds, and kappa artisans displayed their crafts in open-air markets. Issei moved through this hidden world with practiced familiarity, his presence drawing curious glances but no direct challenges. Yusaka had provided formal passage rights, but his own reputation preceded him among the older yokai. The Crimson Shadow was remembered in stories passed down through generations, sometimes ally, sometimes adversary, always dangerous. Serafall walked beside him, her expression reflecting genuine delight at the vibrant yokai culture surrounding them. She had abandoned both her magical girl outfit and the formal attire worn at Yasaka's court, now dressed in casual modern clothing that allowed her to blend with younger yokai. Despite this attempt at inconspicuousness, her power and presence drew attention regardless. Fascinating, she commented as they passed a stall selling enchanted trinkets. The integration of traditional crafting methods with modern magical theory. Devil's society tends toward either complete preservation of ancient methods or wholesale adoption of human innovations. This balanced approach is refreshing. Yokai have always adapted more readily than other supernatural factions, Issei observed. Their nature is inherently transformative. They were headed toward a specific establishment in the heart of the district, an ancient tea house known as the Twilight Maple, which served as neutral ground for various supernatural factions. According to Yasaka, it was where they would meet Kuroka's independent contractors, before proceeding to the mountain compound. The tea house appeared modest from outside, traditional architecture with maple leaves carved into the wooden signboard. Inside, however, it expanded into a space considerably larger than external dimensions would suggest, a common spatial manipulation in yokai establishments. Various supernatural beings occupied private booths separated by screens of varying opacity, depending on the occupants' desire for privacy. A Nekomata hostess approached, her professional smile faltering slightly as she recognized Issei. Honored guests, she greeted with a formal bow. Lady Yasaka has arranged the maple room for your gathering. Please follow me. She led them to a private chamber at the rear of the establishment, where sliding doors opened onto a small garden illuminated by floating foxfire lanterns. Kuroka already waited inside, lounging casual on silk cushions while sipping sake with characteristic insouciance. About time, she remarked, golden eyes gleaming in the soft light. My associates aren't known for their patience. As if summoned by her words, shadows in the garden coalesced into humanoid forms, 3 figures of varying heights but similar predatory grace. They entered the tea room with fluid movements that spoke of extensive combat training. Positioning themselves around Kuroka in a formation that suggested both familiarity and hierarchical structure. Meet my former team, Kuroka introduced with a casual wave. Spec. IA lists in information acquisition and target elimination, currently operating as independent contractors due to certain political complications. The tallest, a male yokai with distinctly vulpine features, stepped forward. Kazuto. He introduced himself simply, intelligence and counter-magic specialist. The second, a petite female with platinum blonde hair and pointed ears that revealed her elvish heritage, nodded curtly. Arya. Spatial manipulation and extraction. The third, gender indeterminate, their features constantly shifting in subtle ways that made direct observation difficult. Remained silent until Kuroka cleared her throat pointedly. Missed, they finally stated, voice neither male nor female. Infiltration and memory extraction. A shapeshifter, Serafall identified with professional interest. True born or acquired ability. Acquired, Mist replied after a hesitation. Through methods I don't discuss with devils. Before tensions could escalate, Issei intervened. Your skills are appreciated, regardless of origin. The mission requires precision and discretion rather than direct confrontation. Kazuto studied him with narrow-eyed assessment. When Kuroka mentioned working with the Ancient One, I assumed exaggeration. Your reputation precedes you, Crimson Shadow. As does yours, Ghost of Kyoto, Issei replied, using the operative's known alias. Your work during the Onmyoji conflicts was noteworthy. The vulpine yokai's ears twitched in surprise at the recognition. That was nearly 50 years ago. Few remember those events with accuracy. I make it a point to remember individuals of exceptional capability, Issei stated simply. Particularly those who operate in regions where I maintain interests. This acknowledgement shifted the atmosphere subtly, establishing a foundation of professional respect that superseded factional differences. Kuroka watched the exchange with calculating eyes, clearly pleased that her associates had passed Issei's initial assessment. Now that introductions are complete, Serafall interjected, perhaps we should review the intelligence and establish operational parameters. Kazuto nodded, producing a rolled parchment from within his jacket. When spread across the low table, it revealed a detailed map of the mountain region north of Kyoto, with specific locations marked in a cipher known only to his team. We've been tracking unusual activities in this region for months, he explained, indicating a particular mountain. Strange energy signatures, unexplained disappearances of sensitive individuals. Supply caravans moving through areas with no registered habitation. The compound is here, Kuroka added, pointing to a specific location. Built into the mountain itself, with multiple entry points. TS concealed by both physical and magical means. Primary access requires passing through 3 checkpoints, each with different security protocols. Conventional approaches would trigger immediate alert, Arya contributed, her Elvish accent giving her Japanese a musical quality. However, there exists a maintenance access point here, she indicated a seemingly unremarkable location on the map. Used for waste disposal and emergency evacuation. Security is lighter, though still substantial. We'll need both magical and physical infiltration techniques, Issei noted, studying the map Wickle experience. The primary objective is confirmation of their capabilities and intentions, with specific focus on identifying this voice and determining the extent of dimensional breach. Secondary objective is assessment of their defenses in preparation for a larger operation, Serafall added. We need to understand what we're facing before committing significant forces. And what about survivors? Mist asked, their features settling momentarily into something approximating concern. Some who disappeared were taken against their will. Others joined voluntarily but may regret that choice now. Extraction of unwilling participants is authorized if opportunity presents itself, Issei confirmed. However, mission integrity takes precedence. We cannot risk exposing ourselves for rescue at attempts that might compromise the primary objective. Kazuto nodded with professional approval. Clear parameters. Acceptable risk assessment. He turned to Kuroka. Standard contract terms. Plus hazard compensation, she replied. This goes beyond our usual operations. Dimensional entities aren't covered in the base agreement. While they finalized contractual details, Serafall moved closer to Issei, speaking quietly. Impressively professional for a team comprised entirely of individuals wanted by various supernatural authorities. Effectiveness often exists independent of legal status, Issei replied. And desperate circumstances occasionally require flexible ethical frameworks. A surprisingly pragmatic view for someone so ancient, she observed with a hint of amusement. LD have expected more rigid moral positions after millennia of existence. Longevity tends to erode absolutes, he countered. Few moral certainties survive the rise and fall of civilizations, each with their own definitions of virtue and transgression. Her eyes studied him with genuine curiosity. And what certainties have survived your long existence, Issei Hyodo? What principles remain uncompromised after 2,000 years? The question was unexpected, personal in a way their previous interactions had not been. It suggested interest beyond their tactical alliance, beyond even the owing attraction he had sensed developing between them. Protection of the innocent, he answered after brief consideration. Not from natural consequences or self-determined choices, but from exploitation by those with greater power or knowledge. And, he paused, the preservation of knowledge. Too much has been lost to time and deliberate destruction. What remains deserves protection. Serafall's expression softened in a way he hadn't witnessed before, neither her public persona's exaggerated expressions nor her tactical composure, but something genuine and unguarded. Worthy principles, she acknowledged quietly. And surprisingly compatible with devil philosophy, despite our reputation. Individual devils, like individual vampires, often transcend the limitations of their species' stereotypes, Issei observed. Though few achieve your particular balance of power, intelligence, and unexpected depth. The compliment, for it was unmistakably that, despite his measured delivery, Br. Ought a faint color to Serafall's cheeks. Before she could respond, Kuroka interrupted by sliding between them with casual presumption. Contracts settled, she announced, golden eyes moving between them with evident amusement at what she had interrupted. We move at midnight. Approach through the eastern ridge, using Mist's concealment abilities combined with your vampire shadow walking. The Vil provides magical countermeasures for detection wards. And you? Serafall inquired, her composure quickly recovered. I'm your guide and early warning system, Kuroka explained. Senjutsu allows me to detect foreign energies before they become problematic. Plus, I know the interior layout from my previous visit. As they finalized tactical details, a server entered bearing a tray of traditional tea and small confections. The group paused their planning temporarily, observing the social niceties required in such establishments. As cups were distributed, Issei noticed Kuroka watching him with unabashed interest. "Something on your mind?" he inquired directly. The Nekomata smiled, her expression reminiscent of a cat that had spotted an interesting prey. "Just wondering what it's like," she replied, sipping her tea with deliberate grace. 2 millennia of existence. All that power, all that knowledge, all that loneliness. Presumptuous, he noted mildly. Accurate, she countered. "I recognize isolation when I see it, Vampire King. I've lived on society's fringes long enough to know its signs, even when concealed behind perfect control and aristocratic manners." Her golden eyes held surprising insight. "The question is whether your isolation is circumstantial or deliberate. Does it matter?" "It might," she replied with unexpected seriousness. "To those of us temporarily orbiting your existence." The statement carried layered meaning that extended beyond Kuroka herself. Issei was acutely aware of Serafall listening intently nearby, and of the complex situation developing between himself and multiple powerful women from different supernatural factions. "Current circumstances dictate necessary cooperation," he stated neutrally. "Personal considerations are secondary to the existential threat we face." Kuroka's smile widened. How convenient that the existential threat provides justification for avoiding personal entanglements. "I wonder if that's coincidence or strategy." Before he could respond, a disturbance from the main tea house interrupted their conversation. Raised voices and the distinctive pulse of magical energy being activated drew everyone's attention. Kazuto moved silently to the doorway, assessing the situation with professional caution. "Trouble," he reported succinctly. "Tengu Enforcement Squadron. Seems they're conducting a sweep for unauthorized Nekomata in the district." Kuroka tensed visibly. "Damn, someone must have recognized me at the council meeting." She glanced at Issei and Serafall. "This complicates our timeline." "Indeed," Issei agreed, rising smoothly. "Wait here." He moved into the main tea house, where 6 Tengu in traditional enforcement garb were questioning the staff and examining patron identification papers. Their leader, a stern-faced female with jet black wings and traditional war fan, directed the operation with military precision. "Captain Hayabusa," Issei greeted, approaching with measured confidence. "An unexpected pleasure." The Tengu captain turned sharply, recognition and surprise flashing across her features. "Lord Hyodo," she acknowledged with a formal bow. "We were unaware of your presence in this establishment." "I'm conducting business with associates," he explained. "Business sanctioned by Lady Yusaka herself, concerning the recent security breaches." The captain's expression revealed conflicting priorities, deference to Yusaka's authority versus commitment to her assigned duties. "We have information regarding unauthorized Nekomata activity in this district," she stated carefully. "Specifically, individuals connected to the Impure clan." "I'm aware," Issei replied smoothly. "In fact, I'm working directly with one such individual under Lady Yusaka's truth binding. The security situation transcends conventional jurisdictional boundaries." Captain Hayabusa's wings rustled with evident discomfort. "With respect, Lord Hyodo, I have specific orders regarding Kuroka of the Impure clan. She is wanted for multiple violations of yokai law, including kinslaying. Circumstances that have been temporarily superseded by existential concerns," came a new voice from the tea house entrance. All turned to see Yusaka herself standing in the doorway, Ninetails fanned majestically behind her. The entire establishment immediately fell into respectful silence, patrons and staff alike bowing deeply to the yokai leader. "Lady Yusaka," Captain Hayabusa acknowledged, dropping to one knee in formal submission. "We were following standard protocols regarding." "I am aware of your duties." "Captain," Yusaka interrupted, her tone gentle but authoritative. "However, current circumstances require flexibility. The individuals gathered here are operating under my direct authority regarding the dimensional incursions." The Tengu captain nodded once, rising. "Understood, my lady. We will withdraw and continue standard patrols elsewhere." After the enforcement squadron departed, Yusaka approached Issei with measured grace. "I anticipated potential complications," she explained. Certain factions within the Yokai Council remain uncomfortable with our alliance with former criminals. Your intervention is appreciated, Issei acknowledged. Though unexpected, I was unaware you planned to join us this evening. A subtle smile touched Yasaka's lips. There are aspects of tonight's operation that require my direct involvement. Her golden eyes held significance beyond her words. Shall we join the others? Time grows short, and our enemy advance. Their plans regardless of our internal politics. In the private chamber, Yasaka's arrival created an immediate shift in dynamics. Kuroka and her associates displayed appropriate deference while maintaining professional composure. Serafall, however, watched the interaction between Issei and Yasaka with analytical interest that suggested she was cataloging every nuance of their familiar dynamic. The reconnaissance parameters have changed, Yasaka announced once formalities were complete. New information has emerged regarding the remaining tiers. The convergence appears to be accelerating their timeline, likely in response to our interference. What kind of acceleration? Serafall inquired, professional focus immediately overriding any personal considerations. Energy readings consistent with a major ritual working have been detected near the mountain compound, Yasaka explained. My shrine maidens believe they are attempting to convert the stolen tiers earlier than planned. Quote, which means our mission is now time-sensitive, Issei concluded. If they successfully convert the tiers before we gather sufficient intelligence, our subsequent response will be compromised. Precisely, Yasaka confirmed, which is why I've decided to accompany you personally. The tiers respond to my energy signature as one of the original sealers. I may be able to disrupt the conversion process if we arrive in time. This announcement created momentary silence as its implications registered. Yasaka rarely left Kyoto's boundaries, her presence crucial to maintaining the complex magical Ra structure that protected the supernatural heart of Japan. Her decision to join a dangerous reconnaissance mission indicated the severity of the threat as she perceived it. Won't your presence be more detectable? Kuroka questioned bluntly. No offense, but nine-tailed fox queens aren't exactly low profile. A legitimate concern, Yasaka acknowledged without offense. However, I possess alment abilities beyond conventional understanding. When necessary, I can reduce my magical signature to that of a common fox spirit. At considerable personal cost, Issei noted, familiar enough her abilities to recognize the sacrifice such suppression would require. A necessary expenditure under current circumstances, she replied simply. The mission planning adjusted to accommodate Yasaka's inclusion, with Kazuto and Arya reconfiguring their approach vectors and timing estimates. As technical details were finalized, Issei found himself in the unusual position of mediating subtlety. Territorial dynamics between three powerful women who had, through various circumstances, become key figures in both the current crisis and his personal existence. Yasaka, with whom he shared centuries of complex history that had evolved from adversarial to allied to something more nuanced over time. Serafall, whose intellectual compatibility and unexpected depth had created a connection that transcended their species' traditional enmity. And now Kuroka, whose directness and understanding of isolation resonated with aspects of his nature long suppressed beneath aristocratic control. After 2 millennia of deliberate emotional distance, the sudden convergence of such connections represented unfamiliar territory even for one as ancient as himself. More concerning, these personal complications had emerged precisely when focus was most critical to addressing the dimensional threat. As midnight approached, the unlikely alliance gathered at the tea house's rear garden, preparing for departure. Mist demonstrated their shapeshifting abilities by assuming the form of a mountain bird native to their target region. Arya created a spatial fold that would allow for accelerated travel across difficult terrain. Kazuto activated protective wards designed to mask their magical signatures from conventional detection methods. Ready? Kuroka asked, addressing the group but looking directly at Issei. Her golden eyes held both excitement and apprehension, the natural response to dangerous undertakings. Proceed, he confirmed, his own millennia of experience allowing him to compartmentalize personal considerations in favor of tactical necessity. As they moved into the night, leaving Kyoto's supernatural district behind for the wild mountains beyond, the gravity of their mission settled around them like a physical weight. Beyond personal dynamics and factional politics, beyond even the immediate threat to Japan's supernatural community, lay the fundamental reality, the barrier between N dimensions weakened with each passing hour. What waited beyond that barrier had nearly destroyed reality itself a millennium ago. And now, for reasons still not fully understood, it sought return. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.